It's only one more month, but during that month, I must fight to increase my cultivation base one step further. He carefully put the copper mirror back into the bag of holding. He knew that he could not let anyone know of its abilities. If he did, it would be difficult for him to keep a hold of it, and he would surely lose his life in the process. He looked down at himself and the filth that covered him. In his excitement, he had almost forgotten about his dirty state, but now he had calmed down quite a bit. He walked out of the immortal's cave to the nearby stream and washed off the grime and impurities. By the time he returned, the sky was growing light. He took out the chi condensation manual and began to study it. Upon reaching the second level of chi condensation, one can use immortal skills. Upon reaching the fifth level, one can study wind walking technique, which is an immortal skill similar to flying. 𝓲 closed his eyes, feeling thorough anticipation regarding the wind walking technique of the fifth level of chi condensation. In that instant, he suddenly felt the temperature increase rapidly within the immortal's cave. Then tongues of fire appeared on his right hand. Considering that he still thought like a mortal, seeing this caused his heart and mind to feel great excitement, which in turn extinguished the flames. 𝓲 promptly calmed himself and rotated his cultivation base. Unfortunately, by the time afternoon arrived, after dozens of attempts, he still could do nothing more than produce a few sparks, whereupon the spiritual energy in his body would disperse. "It's difficult to use this flame-circent art," said 𝓲 with a frown. But he had a persistent personality and would not be discouraged easily, so he practiced breathing exercises for a while before trying again. Night fell, and then dawn came again. For 2 days, 𝓲 tried again and again, failing each time until he became completely exhausted. When the spiritual energy dispersed, he would do breathing exercises, and the resolve in his eyes would grow stronger and stronger. "I can't believe I can't use the flame serpent art," said 𝓲, grinding his teeth and slapping his palm against the bag of holding. Moments later, the demonic core appeared in his hand. He knew that if he consumed the core, and the mirror really had some other fantastic properties, then later when he had enough spirit stones, he would lack an original with which to make copies. "Oh well, no need to worry about such details. Worst case scenario, I go back out into the mountains to look for demonic beasts." He hesitated for a moment, then popped the demonic core into his mouth, closed his eyes, and began his breathing exercises. Spiritual energy exploded inside of him, pouring into every corner of his body. Time passed, and soon it was afternoon. 𝓲 opened his eyes, and they flashed. His cultivation base was still at the second level, but was definitely much stronger. "I think with 3 or maybe 5 more, I can reach the third level of chi condensation." He felt somewhat disappointed, realizing that the higher his cultivation base, the more difficult it would be to make progress. But anticipation filled his heart when he thought of the copper mirror. He raised his hand into the air and made a fist. As he raised his fist, flames appeared, congealing on his right arm and creating a small flaming serpent as long as a finger, which radiated an oppressing heat. 𝓲 felt the spiritual energy in his body instantly reduced by 30%. His face grew pale, but understanding flashed in his eyes and he smiled. He leapt out of the immortal's cave and waved his right hand. The flame serpent flew, slamming into a nearby tree. A banging sound rang out, and the entire tree was engulfed in flame, and within moments had collapsed into ashes. "I have to find a chance to do this in front of Fatty. He'll definitely praise me then." He smiled broadly, feeling quite heroic. Half a month's time passed, during which 𝓲 searched the mountains for demonic beasts and trained his flame serpent art. He worked harder than he had in his secular studies, and soon was quite proficient with it, and was also able to reduce the amount of spiritual energy it used. But it still required considerable effort over the space of about 10 breaths to be able to form it. He also went into the outer sect and secretly tried the mirror out on some of the disciples. However, there was no reaction whatsoever. After a few tries, 𝓲 concluded that the mirror only worked on excessively furred creatures. A bit of a pity, but the mirror was still more powerful than he could have ever wished for. Unfortunately, during the half-month that passed, he never came across any demonic creatures, and his cultivation base became mostly stagnant. Thankfully, every time after he practiced the flame serpent art, his cultivation base would grow a little bit during the recovery period. But he did not dare to engage in such practice in the wild mountains, only in the Immortal's Cave. There are 10 more days until Pill Distribution Day. I'm going to go further out into the mountains. Having made his decision, 𝓮𝓪 departed early in the morning, heading quickly out into the deep mountains. He didn't rest during the day, and by the time night fell, he'd forgotten how many mountain chains he had passed through. Finally, at the foot of a black mountain, he ran into a bear-shaped demonic beast. During the battle, he used a flame serpent and the powerful copper mirror. A series of 5 explosions were followed by a miserable, reverberating scream, whereupon the creature died in a pool of blood. He took its core and was about to head further along the black mountain when suddenly the hairs on his body stood on end. Some distance ahead of him had appeared 5 demonic beasts with the heads of elephants and bodies of tigers. They stared at him, eyes cold. With the mirror, he could easily handle 1 demonic beast, but 5 would be very difficult. He slowly retreated backwards, his right hand clutching the mirror tightly. Suddenly, a massive roar sounded out from the trees covering the black mountain. It grew in intensity until it was like a huge explosion seething in the air. 𝓮𝓪's expression changed, and he ran away as fast as possible, without the slightest intention of slowing down even a bit. Fortunately, the 5 demonic beasts didn't pursue him, and he soon disappeared into the mountains. That cry sounded similar to when Uncle 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵 called out. It seems there are a lot of demonic beasts in that black mountain, even greater demonic beasts. As he sped along, he looked back at the black mountain, more and more convinced of what a dangerous place it was. 10 days passed quickly. With the Black Mountain as his boundary, 𝓮𝓪 ventured into the mountains but didn't come across any more demonic beasts. The bare demonic core in his bag of holding seemed more and more precious, so he didn't eat it. Pill Distribution Day arrived, and the sound of bells filled the air. 𝓮𝓪 left the Immortal's Cave and entered the outer sect. When he had departed a month ago, his cultivation base was the first level of qi condensation, and now it was the second level. Even though he was some distance from the 3rd level, he speculated that if the copper mirror was as effective as he imagined, in the future he would progress by leaps and bounds.
As fearful as ever about suffering a loss, 𝓮𝓪 entered the pill distribution square. Many of the disciples looked at him as he entered, obviously recognizing him. His actions the previous month had caused quite a shock to the outer sect. Even though his cultivation level was low, and a month had passed, the matter had been discussed quite a bit. This time, it was not 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵 who presided, but another middle-aged man. Like last time, he distributed a spirit cultivation pill and half a spirit stone, but there was no individual pill distribution this time. As soon as the pill and the spirit stone were in his bag of holding and the pillars grew dark, 𝓮𝓪 left as quickly as possible, not hesitating a moment. As he left, his eyes swept across the square, and he saw quite a few cultivators blocking fellow disciples to take medicinal pills and spirit stones. Elder Sister XU's blessing still seemed to have an effect. Coupled with his quick departure, the only thing he received was a few cold stares. No one attempted to take anything from him. He breathed a sigh of relief. He was well aware that Elder Sister XU's name could only protect him for so long. This month was fine, but in a few more months, someone would surely make a move against him. As long as the copper mirror works, in a few months, we'll see who will be snatching from whom. Eyes glittering, he lowered his head and walked a bit faster. He left the outer sect, eager to try out the copper mirror, walking as quickly as possible back towards the Insane's Cave. When the cave was not far off, he suddenly stopped in his tracks, his pupils narrowing. A person had just walked out of the jungle. He wore a green robe and looked to be about 24 or 25 years of age. He had an arrogant look on his fierce face as he stood there staring coldly at 𝓮𝓪. His cultivation base was not of the ordinary person. It was the 3rd level of qi condensation. The man stood there blocking 𝓮𝓪. "Greetings, elder brother 𝓲," 𝓮𝓪 said, his expression changing as he took a few steps back. He moved his left hand behind his back and began moving about in the air. He had seen this person before. Just about everyone in the outer sect knew elder brother 𝓢h𝓪𝓵. He was cruel and ruthless, and quite a few low-level disciples had died by his hand in the public zone. He was the kind of person to ingratiate himself to disciples above the third level, but lord it over the first and second levels. "So you've heard of me," Xiao said coldly. "I don't need to make any more introductions. Hand over your medicinal pill and spirit stone." Others didn't dare to touch Meng Hao, but 𝓢h𝓪𝓵 had entered the sect years ago and knew how things worked. Elder Sister 𝓗𝓪 often secluded herself, ignoring the lives of the people beneath her. "Elder brother Xiao, can't you make an exception?" Meng Hao said, taking a few steps back. I'm just a simple scholar, and I just got the spirit stone and medicinal pill. Can't you give me a bit of time with them?" This person's cultivation level was greater than his by more than an entire level. Furthermore, he had never fought anyone before. His face grew pale from fear. "You call yourself a scholar?" Xiao sneered, then laughed loudly. "Don't tell me you were a scholar before you came here. Come, recite some poetry for your elder brother. Maybe you'll lighten my mood and I won't beat you and break your legs." "Elder brother Xiao." Meng Hao was extremely nervous and quite angry as well, but he had no choice but to hold on and try to talk some sense into the man. "The sages said, Shut up. I'll take not only your medicinal pill and spirit stone, but the insane's cave as well. From now on, we are fellow disciples in the outside world, but in the cave, you will be my servant. If you say even one more word, I'll help you to understand the meaning of the expression, death is better than life." Glaring murderously, he began walking towards Meng Hao. His cultivation base had already broken to the third level of key condensation and needed large amounts of spiritual energy, so of course he had taken a fancy on Meng Hao's insane's cave. However, he still feared elder sister 𝓗𝓪, so he had come up with the idea to keep him as a servant. After some time passed, elder sister 𝓗𝓪 would surely forget the nobodies beneath her, and he could just kill Meng Hao. Or if he didn't kill him, he could cripple him and force him to stick around reciting poetry to show how elegant 𝓢h𝓪𝓵 was. "The insane's cave belongs to elder sister 𝓗𝓪. How could I act as her agent? Elder brother Xiao, please don't make things so hard for me." Behind his back, strands of spiritual energy had collected in Meng Hao's right hand. He knew that he was not a match for 𝓢h𝓪𝓵, but the insane's cave was too important, and the spirit stone even more so. There was no way he would hand it over. Therefore, his heart filled with uncertainty and anger, he used the name of elder sister 𝓗𝓪. "I give you some face and you ignore it. You're just looking for trouble. I'll definitely teach you what it means to prefer death over life." An impatient expression on his face, he raced towards Meng Hao, his outstretched hands twisting like claws. Meng Hao looked completely shocked and frightened, which 𝓢h𝓪𝓵 liked. He enjoyed seeing such looks on the face of people weaker than him. He could just imagine Meng Hao dropping to the ground in front of him, trembling. Just when he was feeling most proud of himself, right before he reached Meng Hao's horrified expression disappeared, to be replaced with sternness. He flung his right hand out from behind him, and a burning, finger-long flame serpent shot towards 𝓢h𝓪𝓵. Meng Hao's heart thumped furiously. He knew that the flame serpent art was not strong enough to kill his opponent, but he still hoped that it would at least slow him down. He could not bear to be captured, much less hand over all his possessions and become a servant. He would flee into the mountains in an instant if he could. "Flame serpent art!" 𝓢h𝓪𝓵's expression changed. He retreated backwards, his hand slapped his bag of holding, and produced a small white sword which he threw towards the flame serpent. There was a bang, and the flame serpent disappeared. The white sword had been twisted and bent, so he kicked it aside into the jungle. Looking quite embarrassed, 𝓢h𝓪𝓵 continued to move backwards, watching as Meng Hao fled into the mountains. He was both furious and astonished. "You little bastard," Xiao called in a sinister voice. "There's no one out here in these mountains. Do you want to die? I'm gonna finish you." Considering how quickly Meng Hao was running, he decided that it was time to use one of his more powerful techniques. He roared, and his body expanded, the hair on his body growing thick and golden-colored. Some of the hair even stuck out through his clothing. It looked as if he had transformed into something like a demonic beast. This was a technique he had picked up before joining the sect, the were-demon skill. It was a skill which could be cultivated after reaching the second level of key condensation, but the demonic transformation was not very obvious. The body grew bigger and stronger and more frightening.
Such a skill would allow him to rampage among lower-level disciples. He could only use this skill for a limited time, but it was quite effective, his killing trump card. Now that his cultivation base had reached the third level of key condensation, this skill was even more fully developed. Being able to grow such thick golden fur was a pleasant surprise. Being able to shapeshift into such a demonic form would enable him to easily shock his opponents. He brimmed with confidence, his thick golden fur shining brightly, mighty and dominating. Fur even grew from his face. He looked exactly like a human-shaped demonic beast.
You will be the first person to die under my 𝓗𝓪 skill. How just and fair. Chapter 9. Impatience and Frustration. Using this technique at the third level allowed 𝓗𝓪𝓵 to increase his strength by several degrees, as well as his speed. Grinning hideously, face full of greed, he charged toward Meng Hao, sharp claws glittering in the sunlight. He brimmed with confidence, certain that Meng Hao's fear would break him. Flee he might, but escape he could not. "Run!" laughed 𝓗𝓪𝓵 with a ferocious smile, his powerful voice reverberating through the air. When 𝓗𝓪𝓵 shape-shifted into demonic form, Meng Hao was fleeing up ahead. He saw what happened out of the corner of his eye, and a look of surprise filled his face. But then, it seemed he had thought of something, and a different, stranger expression replaced the surprise. This demonic form looked exactly like the forms of the various beasts that had been exploded by the copper mirror. In fact, he even had more radiant fur covering his body than those other beasts had. Meng Hao looked carefully at 𝓗𝓪𝓵, the strange expression still covering his face. The thick golden fur made him look like some sort of king of beasts. When 𝓗𝓪𝓵 saw the look on Meng Hao's face, he felt astonished. When he had broken through to the third level of key condensation, he had tried out the 𝓗𝓪 form, but this was the first time he had revealed it to another person. Meng Hao's strange expression irritated him. He let out a cold harumph, and the murderous look appeared in his eyes. "I think you will probably like this copper mirror," said Meng Hao. Seeing 𝓗𝓪𝓵's speed increase so much in his 𝓗𝓪 form, he realized that he would close the distance between them rapidly. He took a few steps back and slapped the bag of holding with his right hand. Instantly, the copper mirror appeared. With the strange expression still covering his face, he shined the mirror on 𝓗𝓪𝓵 in all his arrogant splendor. As soon as the mirror began to shine, Meng Hao felt it begin to emit a burning heat that he had never felt before. This was a much stronger reaction than when it had encountered other demonic beasts, as if some sort of powerful thirst had been unleashed within it. At that moment, a sort of invisible aura burst forth from the mirror and shot forward. 𝓗𝓪𝓵 leapt toward Meng Hao, his aura radiating murder and ferocity. Suddenly, he felt strange, as if some sort of gas had entered his body. It roiled violently within him, and from the outside, it looked as if the aura was trying to claw its way out. 𝓗𝓪𝓵's expression changed. He felt severe pain in his organs, which quickly rose to a critical level. Without thinking, he pushed the aura down to his dantian region in order to force it out. The aura was powerful, and it seemed to be seeking a weak spot in his body to emerge from. When he pushed the aura down to his dantian, it rushed directly toward his buttocks, and in an instant, it exploded out with violent, gut-wrenching pain. 𝓗𝓪𝓵 let out an uncontrollable, blood-curdling scream. He had never made such a sound before in his life, because never before had he experienced something like this. His body began to tremble, and he glared wrathfully at Meng Hao. The murder in his bloodshot eyes grew fiercer. "Elder brother 𝓗," said Meng Hao, his heart thumping. This was the first time he had ever fought someone. "Why don't we end things here? If you don't make things hard for me, I won't make things hard for you. A happy ending." He clamped his hand over the mirror. The sound of his opponent's scream had unsettled him. He couldn't take it. After all, this was a person, not a demonic beast. "You little bastard," shouted 𝓗𝓪𝓵. "Today, I'm not just going to kill you, I'm going to go down the mountain, find your family, and kill them too. I'll humiliate your entire clan." The pain had caused him to nearly go mad. His eyes burned, and with a roar, he pounced toward Meng Hao, sharp claws preparing to rip him to shreds. Meng Hao was just a scholar and had never been in a fight, but he possessed courage, and hearing 𝓗𝓪𝓵 say such things caused murderous intent to shine in his eyes. There was no point in trying to talk reason to a person who clearly wanted to provoke him. He couldn't bear to hear the miserable screams, but hearing such threats would cause anyone to lose their temper. He took a few steps back and unflinchingly held up the mirror. As 𝓗𝓪𝓵 approached, he felt something roaring toward him. Once again, the terrifying aura entered his body. Considering what he had just experienced, he protected himself, sealing off the aura so it couldn't escape. But just when he was feeling confident in his success, it shot through his body, rumbling, then exploded out his left ear. The pain was many times more severe than before, and he let out a horrible, shrill shriek that was impossible to describe. Then his right ear exploded, showering out blood. His head felt as if it were about to split down the middle, and his face had grown pale white. Dumb with astonishment, he stared at Meng Hao. Then his face filled with monstrous savagery. "I will kill your entire family and then eliminate your whole clan. I'll make them all feel pain like this, then let them die screaming." Enduring the pain and also death, he leapt toward Meng Hao, filled with insane determination to kill his opponent. "I give you face and you ignore it," said Meng Hao, gaping. He had never seen the mirror explode an ear before. Looking stern, he retreated further, again shining the mirror on 𝓗𝓪𝓵. "Meng Hao!" screamed 𝓗𝓪𝓵, his right ear exploding into shreds. Both ears swelled. His expression was no longer of ferocious rage, but of astonishment and dread. He turned, faster than he had ever turned in his life, and made to flee, having lost any desire to mess with Meng Hao. But the fear in his heart caused him to tremble so violently that he couldn't even flee. Instead, he focused, and once again summoned his desire to kill. He would inflict pain on Meng Hao's family and also take away that damned copper mirror. But even as he turned, the mirror, for the first time ever, flew out of Meng Hao's hands. It seemed its interest had been aroused. It flew after 𝓗𝓪𝓵, attacking him multiple times. 𝓗𝓪𝓵's eyes filled with desperation. It appeared as if some incredible power had entered his body. He screamed uncontrollably, unable to flee. Something tossed him into the air, and his left ear, right ear, chest, and legs all exploded violently. As the aura exploded out, it sent mists of blood into the air, and in the space of time it takes to breathe 10 times, 𝓗𝓪𝓵's eyes grew dark, and his body slowly shifted from demon form back to normal. The fur disappeared, and seemingly because of this, the copper mirror lost its interest and flew back to Meng Hao. 𝓗𝓪𝓵's body dropped to the ground. Blood covered everything. 𝓗𝓪𝓵's dead eyes still shone with horror and despair. Anyone who laid eyes on him would surely tremble. Looking at 𝓗𝓪𝓵's corpse, Meng Hao sucked in a deep breath. The copper mirror flew back into his hand, whereupon his body shook. Awe and veneration filled his eyes. Seeing some wild animals explode was not a big deal, but this time it had been a living person. Seeing the blood and gore everywhere, he trembled. The stench of death on the mirror made him want to get rid of the mirror. He loosened his hand and tossed it to the ground. He was just a scholar after all. The mirror had seemed interesting at first, but now it seemed incredibly gruesome and conflicted with the Confucian ideals which Meng Hao believed in. He stood in silence for some time, feeling flustered at heart. The frustration could be seen in his eyes. In his heart, he was still a scholar from Yunji County. He spoke the truth to people and had never been in a fight, let alone killed anyone. That behavior was deeply rooted in his heart and could not easily be changed. As he contemplated the situation, his heart struggled. The etiquette, happiness, kindness, and justice of Confucianism, and its search for truth, demands of refraining from killing. But the sect says, the strong shall prey on the weak. Now I understand the truth of that saying, but to actually put it into practice is different. Trembling, Meng Hao felt frightened even just thinking about what had happened. After a long time, he let out a long sigh and started to walk off. But having taken only a few steps, he ground his teeth, turned, and walked back to 𝓤𝓮𝓪𝓵's corpse. He picked up his bag of holding, then summoned the flame serpent and placed it onto the body. The fire didn't completely eat up the corpse, so 𝓮𝓏 consumed a spirit-condensing pill, then shot 3 more flame serpents down. Soon, the corpse had withered up to the point where it was unrecognizable. He did some breathing exercises, gritted his teeth, then shot 2 more flame serpents. Now, the corpse was completely ash. Glancing at the mirror on the ground, he clenched his jaw, walked over, and picked it up, gripping it firmly. Still feeling conflicted and afraid, 𝓮𝓏 left, walking back to the Immortal's cave as quickly as possible. He sat in a daze. For a long time, he just sat there, before finally moving again to open 𝓤𝓮𝓪𝓵's bag of holding. When he saw what was inside, his eyes glittered. The dark mood caused by his first kill suddenly changed. "This guy was so rich," he exclaimed, sucking in a breath. The bag of holding contained 8 spirit stones, 7 spirit condensing pills, and a bone fragment covered with strange symbols. He looked at the bone fragment, then immediately tossed it aside. It described the were-demon technique. He didn't dare to even touch it. He didn't want to turn into a were-demon and then be destroyed by his own copper mirror. As he tossed the bone chip aside, he suddenly remembered the flying sword. He immediately walked out of the cave and tracked it down in the jungle. He lifted up the short white sword and returned to the cave to examine it, eyes glittering. 𝓮𝓏 couldn't think of how to reconcile the differences between the ways of immortals and the path of Confucius, so he decided to stop thinking about the matter. Maybe he would understand it one day, but for now, the most important thing was to figure out a way to stay alive in the sect. Eyes filled with resolve, he took the spirit stones out and felled them. Then he pulled out the copper mirror and put it down next to him, looking at it for some time. "Elder Brother Zhao provoked me. I had to strike back. I tried to smooth things out, but he refused. I killed someone, but I tried to be reasonable. I tried to be kind, but he rushed into death. The mirror reeks of blood. In the hands of an evildoer, it would be a tool of evil, but in my hands, it will be different. I have Confucian kindness in my heart, and this treasure is mine. It will be different." He looked down at the mirror and took a deep breath. "It doesn't just explode things and doesn't just seek blood. In the future, I will use it carefully." He muttered to himself like this for some time, then lifted his head, thinking about the other mystery of the mirror and his hope. He ground his teeth. Success or failure? Now we'll see. If it's a success, then 𝓮𝓏's cultivation practice will be anything but ordinary. With no more hesitation, 𝓮𝓏 pulled out the demonic core and the half a spirit stone, then placed them down on the mirror. He waited with nervous anticipation. Enough time passed for half an incense to burn, but absolutely nothing happened. The demonic core didn't change. The spirit stone didn't disappear. There was still only one demonic core. 𝓮𝓏 frowned. He paced around the cave for a bit before looking back at the mirror. It can't be. Last month it definitely made 2. He stared at the spirit stone on the mirror, lost in thought. After a while, he slapped the bag of holding and pulled out another half of a spirit stone, which he carefully placed down on the mirror. Almost as soon as he put the spirit stone down, a black aura flashed across the surface of the mirror, and it seemed to turn into a lake. The 2 spirit stones sunk down, and the blackness rippled, condensing onto the demonic core. And then, next to the first demonic core, appeared a second. 𝓮𝓏 was stupefied. Even though he had prepared himself in heart, he was still shocked. After some time passed, he picked up the 2 demonic cores and examined them excitedly. So it's true! How profound! He began to breathe hard and took some time before he could pull himself together. Suddenly, everything seemed possible. He took a few deep breaths, then tried out the process again. 1 stone, 2 stones, 9 stones, he only had 1 left over. In front of him were 4 full demonic cores. If you counted the original, that would be 5. The stones emitted a sweet aroma, which grew thick in the air, leaving him feeling intoxicated. A silly grin on his face, he realized that this was the most wealth he had ever possessed in his entire life. It was a sight none of the disciples of the outer sect had ever seen. His excitement lasted until deep into the night. Clutching the demonic cores, he placed one on his tongue and swallowed it down. 2 hours later, he opened his eyes and took another pill. He had never done something so extravagant before. By the time the seemingly boundless energy of the two demonic cores was fully dispersed in his body, dawn had arrived. His body thrummed, and gobs of filth had been excreted through his pores. When he opened his eyes, they shone brilliantly. The third level of key condensation. Meng Hao was still not content. He looked down at the remaining 3 pills. He took another one. By the dawn of the next day, he had consumed all the demonic cores. His cultivation base was just a hair's breadth away from being at the peak of the 3rd level of key condensation. As for the 8 spirit condensing pills, they would not be of much use to Meng Hao considering his current cultivation base. Even taking all of them at once wouldn't do much good. He suspected that it had something to do with the demonic cores. Considering that the spirit cultivation pills were regularly distributed by the sect, they shouldn't be so ineffective. A small amount won't do. Even if I took dozens, it wouldn't have much of an effect. Meng Hao closed his eyes, concentrating on the spiritual energy in his body. It was no longer a stream. It had turned into a river. Not a massive river, but definitely larger than a stream. As it circulated through his body, it gave him a feeling of power. He could sense an astonishing amount of energy filling him. Considering the shocking level of power, Meng Hao knew that compared to yesterday, he had undergone a thorough rebirth. Before, he was a weak cultivator who could have been pushed around. Now, amongst the 3rd level disciples who could occupy the public zone, his cultivation base was so high that it placed him as one of the most powerful. He waved his right hand excitedly, and the flame serpent as long as his arm roared to life. Its heat immediately filled the immortal's cave. The fierce flame serpent, filled with awe-inspiring savagery, spit out a blast of fire.
If he had encountered Zhao Wugong with this level of power, his flame serpent would have flown forth. It would at the very least have seriously injured him, if not left him dead. Chapter 10. Wang Tengfei. Toward the end of September, it grew as hot as usual. The heat refused to dissipate, instead growing more and more intense. In the lands of South Heaven, things usually began to cool by around the 11th month of the year in the southern domain in the state of Zha. By the 1st month of the following year, the freezing grip of winter could be felt. One morning at dawn, Meng Hao left the Uncertain's cave, eyes shining, full of hope regarding the future. My cultivation base is just a hair's breadth away from the peak of the 3rd level of qi condensation, he said, taking a deep breath. Perhaps I can't be considered powerful in the outer sect, but at least no one will pick on me. He looked off into the distance. The mountain breeze lifted his hair up as it blew past, and he suddenly appeared quite elegant. Originally a down-and-out scholar, he had entered the world of immortals. When he thought back at the events which had occurred in the preceding days, they seemed almost unreal. It's too bad I don't have enough spirit stones, and the spirit condensation pills aren't strong enough to be of any use. His excitement faded into disappointment when he thought about spirit stones. Fatty, Wang Yusai, and that other headstrong young man. The 4 of us came to the Reliance sect together. I wonder how they are now. His body moved forward in a flash. Circulating the spiritual energy in his body, he immediately headed toward the North Mountain. The east, south, west, and north mountains of the Reliance sect towered mightily into the sky, covered with pavilions carved from jade. If you looked at the mountains closely, you could see rays of dawnlight seeping over their peaks, just beginning to illuminate the surroundings. White clouds wound around the peaks, concealing parts of the mountains. It really did seem like a place of immortals. If you wanted to go from the South Mountain to the North Mountain but wanted to circumvent the outer sect, you would have to pass along the East or West Mountain. Meng Hao walked along the path passing the East Mountain, 2 wild chickens in hand. I haven't seen Fatty in about 2 months. I wonder if he's lost any weight. Thinking about Fatty, Meng Hao smiled. Then his eyes flickered and he stopped walking. He felt a gentle breeze from up ahead which carried along with it a thin fog. Amid the fog walked a young man wearing a luxurious white robe. He was clearly different than other outer sect disciples. His garment was as white as snow, and his long hair flowed over his shoulders. Incredibly handsome, almost pretty, he gave off a sense of being perfect in every way, both physically and in temperament, as if he had been blessed by heaven, chosen by nature.
His expression was cool and indifferent, as if nothing was worthy to cause him to change it. Even if the mountains crumbled in front of him, he would remain calm. The fog beneath him rolled and churned. Behind him walked two youths who were also handsome, but when compared to the white-robed man, seemed like trash. Elder Brother Wang, we've heard that in a few years the sect will have special training to promote disciples into the inner sect. We would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you in advance. Yes, when Elder Brother Wang entered the sect, he was already famous. He even aroused the interest of the other three great sects. But in the end, he decided to stick with the Reliance sect. What extraordinary magnanimity! Refusal to violate the etiquette of the sect, ignoring the invitations of the outsiders, reaching the 6th level of chi condensation in these 2 years. I even heard one of the patriarchs say that the promotion training was being held just for Elder Brother Wang. That's right. Once Elder Brother Wang enters the inner sect, it won't be long before he surpasses Elder Sister Xu and Elder Brother Chen. He'll be the famous #1 disciple of the Reliance sect. "Don't speak foolishly," said the man in the white robe, his voice gentle but warm and manly, pleasant to the ear. This was the #1 disciple of the outer sect, Wang Tangfei. Elder has achieved outstanding mastery of cultivation. With such latent talent and good nature, we junior brothers are happy to receive your instruction. Yes, Elder Brother Wang treats everyone kindly, even disciples of the 1st level of chi condensation. Everyone in the sect knows this. I truly admire you. They talked, walking slowly toward Meng Hao, and Elder Brother Wang, in his white robe, caught sight of Meng Hao and nodded. He passed them, and the other two people didn't even give him a single look. As they walked off, Meng Hao glanced back. It was then that he noticed the white-robed man's feet were not on the ground. Instead, he floated about 7 inches off the ground. Meng Hao gaped in shock. He realized that he himself couldn't even compare in any way. He was frail and swarthy, not attractive in any way. Furthermore, he carried 2 squirming chickens in his hands. So that's Elder Brother Wang Tangfei. He has the ability to float in the air, a skill which comes with the 5th level of chi condensation. He had heard rumors about Elder Brother Wang and knew a lot about him. When he entered the sect, it caused a big commotion in the cultivation world in the state of 𝓲. No one knew the true price paid by the Reliance sect to calm the waves of commotion, or why he decided to stay. If I looked like him, I could have placed first in the imperial exams. I could have married the emperor's daughter. Filled with admiration, Meng Hao turned and continued on toward the North Mountain. He didn't stop the entire way, and by midday he had arrived in the wild mountains bordering the North Mountain. This is where Meng Hao and Fatty had usually come to chop wood. As soon as he arrived, he heard the sounds of chopping. With a smile, he walked briskly forward, and soon caught sight of Fatty chopping away at a tree. He was about to call out a greeting, then stopped and took a step back. "You stole my wife, and my man too. I'm going to chop you to death. I'm going to bite you to death." Fatty hadn't lost any weight. In fact, he was a bit fatter. He looked like a round ball. His eyes were closed, and he stood there howling, surrounded by chopped-up pieces of wood. He hacked at the trees, his body twisting. Then he dropped the axe and fell asleep. Deep bite marks could be seen on the long handle of the axe. Meng Hao was shocked. He had never imagined that in his 2 months away, Fatty's sleepwalking behavior would become even seriouser. Now it wasn't just happening at night, but during the day as well. He was hesitating as to whether or not to awaken him when suddenly Fatty's nose twitched and he rubbed his eyes. He gazed about, eyes shining, looking as if he were about to drool. "I smell wild chicken. Yeah, 2 of them." He jumped up and looked around, although he didn't see Meng Hao standing there in the jungle. Then he saw the felled trees around him. A look of gratefulness filled his eyes.
"Ah, Meng Hao, you're so kind," he said emotionally. "You've been gone so long, but you keep coming back secretly to help me chop wood. It's been like this for almost 2 months. Meng Hao, I, 𝓢h𝓪𝓵, have never had a better friend in my whole life." Meng Hao, still standing off in the distance, heard all of this and was amazed. He looked strangely at Fatty, then coughed lightly and stepped forward. When he appeared, it seemed Fatty could sense him. He turned his head and caught his sight, his face full of excitement. "𝓮𝓪, you finally show your face," he said eagerly. "Every time I wake up, I call out for you, but you never appear." "Ah?" His gaze fell onto the two wild chickens and his eyes grew wide. A bit later, fire surrounded the chickens, and the fragrant aroma filled the air. 𝓮𝓪 and Fatty sat together, just as they had when they had both been servants. They gobbled down the chicken. "I haven't had wild chicken for 2 months. How come you haven't shown your face all this time? Since you always come to help me chop wood, why don't you bring chickens too?" The joy on his face was clearly apparent as he looked at 𝓮𝓪. It seemed that in his time in the Reliance sect, he had come to view 𝓮𝓪 as a relative. 𝓮𝓪 gave an enigmatic laugh and offered no explanation. Taking a bite of chicken, he looked at Fatty. It was then he noticed that Fatty's teeth seemed to be longer than before. "How has your cultivation training been going? Have you been able to sense spiritual energy?" "Don't bring it up," he said with a deep sigh. "I train every night, but the strange thing is, I haven't been able to sense even a tiny bit of spiritual energy. The only thing that happens is that my teeth grow. I'm worried I might bite my tongue off." He looked quite depressed. "Open your mouth," 𝓮𝓪 said, suddenly. "Let me see your teeth." What 𝓮𝓪 saw shocked him. After swallowing a mouthful of chicken, Fatty opened his mouth to reveal a set of long teeth that glittered in the sunlight. As he examined them, 𝓮𝓪's expression grew even stranger. He almost couldn't believe it. He could clearly sense spiritual energy fluctuating within Fatty's teeth. How is Fatty doing his training? How could the spiritual energy be moving into his teeth? They've become spirit teeth. If he keeps training this way, they'll transform into true treasures. He shook his head in amazement. Time passed, and soon the sun was about to set. 𝓮𝓪 and Fatty chatted just as they used to in the old days. He told Fatty all about the things that had happened in the outer sect, with the exception of the copper mirror, of course. Fatty listened raptly, filled with the desire to reach the first level of chi condensation and get promoted. When it came time to leave, 𝓮𝓪 gave a spirit condensation pill to Fatty. He swallowed it, and then they parted. Fatty watched 𝓮𝓪 disappear into the jungle, looking a bit melancholy, assuring himself that he would apply himself diligently to cultivation training. He had come by route of the East Mountain, so 𝓮𝓪 decided to return by the West Mountain. This was his first time traversing the entirety of the Reliance sect. By the time dusk fell, he was walking next to a plateau that jutted out from the West Mountain. On the plateau was a massive stone tablet. The stone tablet was the color of blood, as if it had been painted with gore. Several characters were carved onto the cold stone. Low-level public zone. There were more characters off to the side, smaller. It explained that the chi condensation 4th level disciples were prohibited from entering. Only 1st through 3rd levels could enter the public zone. Looking up, 𝓮𝓪 could see the multiple figures interlocked in combat. Many techniques were being used as they fought desperately. Blood sprayed in all directions, and miserable cries rang out. An arm lopped off, a bag of holding snatched. As he watched, someone rushed down the mountain screaming, followed by a huge man with a hideous grin. "Help me! Who can save you from cow?" Chapter 11. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet. Not too far ahead of him, 𝓮𝓪 saw someone screaming for help. Before the person could get off the plateau, the huge man's flying sword hit him, piercing his neck. He fell twitching to the ground in a shower of blood, rattled the last breath, then died. The huge man grabbed his victim's bag of holding, then turned and headed back into the public zone. 𝓮𝓪 watched the grisly scene unfold, then further observed what was happening on the plateau. The sounds of slaughter drifted along with the wind, which carried the scent of blood and gore into 𝓮𝓪's nostrils. You can get rich overnight in this place, but it's also extremely dangerous. For cultivation, for spirit stones, people put their lives on the line. It's not really worth it. 𝓮𝓪 frowned. He was almost at the peak of the 3rd level of chi condensation,
But what was happening up there was just too chaotic. It would be too easy to be injured, and if he were robbed, it would have a long-lasting effect. Meng Hao thought about the lack of spirit stones in his bag. If he depended on receiving spirit stones distributed by the sect, who knows how many years he would have to wait. Muttering to himself, he looked up at the cultivators on the plateau. They fought fiercely, each and every one having suffered injuries. Suddenly, Meng Hao had a flash of insight, an idea. His idea grew more and more clear, and his eyes began to shine. He turned and hurried off, not to the enchanted cave in the South Mountain, but rather down to the outer sect. He skirted the main square and eventually arrived at a building. The building appeared to be ancient and was surrounded by the fragrant aroma of medicine. Inscribed above the doorway were characters that read, "Pill Cultivation Workshop." It wasn't his first time coming here. Actually, in his first month after being promoted to the outer sect, he had come here once to check out the various medicinal pills that were for sale. That's when he had learned about the fasting pills you could buy which would prevent hunger for several days. The only currency used here were spirit stones and spirit condensation pills. Unfortunately, the exchange rate was very unfair. For example, one spirit condensation pill could be traded for 10 fasting pills. Because of this, few people came here, and it tended to be cold and deserted. When he arrived, he didn't hesitate. It wasn't large inside, and sitting cross-legged in the middle of the room was a sickly-looking middle-aged man. Surrounding him on the interlocking wooden shelves were an assortment of gourd bottles, inscribed upon which were the names of various medicines. There were blood coagulation pills, which could treat external injuries, skeletal relaxation pills to relieve fatigue, spirit refreshment pills to temporarily increase energy, and of course, fasting pills and appetite control pills. There were even marrow-growing pills, which could treat broken and crushed bones. There were many types of medicines, but all of them were considerably costly. For most, the cost of 3 to 10 pills was one spirit condensation pill. To most disciples of the inner sect, a spirit condensation pill was worth fighting over, so few were willing to come here and trade them away.
Meng Hao strolled around the pill cultivation workshop muttering to himself, his eyes glittering. Then he pulled out 5 spirit condensation pills and exchanged them for a handful of different types of medicines. It seemed the sickly man didn't see customers like Meng Hao very often. He brightened up immediately, handing over the bottle gourds of medicine. Placing all the bottle gourds into his bag of holding, Meng Hao left, carefully taking a circuitous route through the mountainous forest back to the ensembled's cave. By the time he arrived, night had fallen. He sat down cross-legged, looking at the 4 bottle gourds. The sages said, if you do not expend, you will not profit. I've paid a lot this time, and I'm going to get a lot in return. Quietly comforting himself in this way, he stood and left the cave, returning shortly with a long tree branch about the thickness of his arm, along with a large pile of leaves. He pulled a green robe out of 𝓢h𝓪𝓵's bag of holding, and tore the seams apart, then laid it out in front of him. It seemed the right size, so he pulled another robe out, tore the seams, and placed it with the first. He looked down, contented. Next, he crushed up the leaves to produce a thick sap. Then, he dipped his fingers into the makeshift ink and wrote several large characters onto the cloth in sweeping calligraphy. He looked at it, feeling quite satisfied, then closed his eyes and began doing breathing exercises. The night passed, and early the next morning, he picked up the tree branch and left the cave hurriedly. It didn't take long to reach the plateau, and despite the early hour, there were already a few disciples there locked in battle. The fierceness of the fighting was readily apparent. Ignoring the other cultivators, Meng Hao passed the large stone tablets and walked onto the plateau. His eyes scanned the surroundings until falling to rest on a boulder that stuck up out of the ground along the border. He walked over and sat down cross-legged on the boulder, looking every bit the peaceful and harmless scholar. Occasionally, some of the others would look at him darkly, whereupon he would reveal some of his cultivation level. Frightened, they left him alone. He decided to wait until more people arrived. Time passed, and gradually more and more fellow disciples arrived in the public zone. Soon there were about 20 people. Some of them looked at the kind, scholarly Meng Hao and started to walk toward him. All he had to do was reveal a bit of his cultivation level, and they would retreat in shock. After a while, he figured there were enough people. He slapped his bag of holding, retrieving the cloth strip. He attached it to the tree branch, which he then stabbed into the clay soil next to the boulder. The mountain breeze lifted the cloth up, turning it into a streaming banner. It caught the attention of quite a few of the people nearby, particularly the characters written on it. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet. The dark green characters seemed to flash, causing the facial expressions of the nearby Reliance sect disciples to change. Some seemed astonished, others confused. Some sneered and others frowned. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet? What does that mean? Don't tell me that guy's an apprentice alchemist sent by the sect's Pill Cultivation Workshop. He looks familiar. Discussions broke out on the plateau after 𝓮𝓪 revealed the flag, but after a bit of time passed, the fighting and robbing resumed. Blood showered and screams rang out. 𝓮𝓪's eyes shone as he looked about at the people in the public zone. Not far from him were two cultivators of the second level of key condensation locked in combat, their eyes red. One of them had a shoulder sliced open by his opponent's flying sword. Blood showered out and he seemed to be in a very difficult position. "Brother, come here," called out 𝓮𝓪. "Brother, the sages said it is not wise to risk one's life when injured. You seem to be bleeding quite profusely from your shoulder. It won't benefit you to let yourself be killed. I happen to have a blood coagulation pill here from the Pill Cultivation Workshop. It can heal all of the sword wounds on your body in less than it takes to take 3 breaths. As 𝓮𝓪 made his sales pitch, the two fighting men ignored him and continued to fight. The injured cultivator's eyes grew redder, and the wound on his shoulder grew worse. Then blood poured from his chest as his opponent's flying sword hit him again. "Look, you got wounded again," admonished 𝓮𝓪 of his first potential customer. "Quick, come and buy a blood coagulation pill. Otherwise, you might be defeated. All you have to do is give me 1 spirit stone and I'll give you a blood coagulation pill. It's definitely worth it." "Shut up," roared the injured cultivator, retreating a pace. "The Pill Cultivation Workshop is a ripoff, but they charge 1 spirit stone for 5 blood coagulation pills. You're even worse." It's not expensive. Your life is much more precious than a spirit stone. If you die, then all your spirit stones will belong to someone else. All you have to do is buy some of my medicine and then you'll have the chance to win and snatch your opponent's bag of holding. All for the price of a single spirit stone. Is that expensive? You're not buying medicine, you're buying your own life. 𝓮𝓪 stood. Perhaps his words had affected the wounded cultivator. He struggled backwards a few paces, hesitation showing on his face. "Damn it," roared the man's opponent, pointing his flying sword. "If you mess things up for me, then after I kill this guy, I'll come after you." "I'll buy it," said the injured man, slapping his bag of holding and producing a spirit stone, which he shot toward 𝓮𝓪. 𝓮𝓪 snatched it out of the air and tossed back a blood coagulation pill. The cultivator grabbed it and placed it on his wounded shoulder. It stopped bleeding almost immediately. Refreshed, his spirit enlivened, he leapt back into the fight. Suddenly, his opponent retreated, blood flowing out from his wounded chest. "Brother, said 𝓮𝓪, switching customers. "Your opponent bought one of my blood coagulation pills and is now brimming with energy. I think if you don't buy one as well, you will be facing much peril. I don't just have blood coagulation pills. I also have skeletal relaxation pills to counter fatigue. I'll give you 1 each for 2 spirit stones. That will guarantee you healing and plenty of energy. You'll definitely be able to achieve victory." You, said the first man indignantly. He didn't know what to say. Was this Pill Cultivation Workshop pillboy here to help him or hurt him? He had just gone from a miserable situation to one of hope. Then this happened. He attacked more incisively in his indignation. The scene playing out in front of him was exactly as it was when he bought his medicine. If you win, then you're actually spending someone else's spirit stones on the medicine. It's really worth it. "I'll take it," said the man who had already bought a pill. "Damn it. Give it to me," said the cultivator who had originally held the upper hand. Despite his hatred for 𝓮𝓪, hearing the other man demand the medicine caused him to grit his teeth and open his mouth. "I'll give 3 spirit stones." "Brother, he's offering 3. If you can't top that, I'll have to give the medicine to him. Take care." "I'll give 4.
"Brother, he's offering 4. 4. 5. 6. Damn it, I give up." Die! The cultivator who had originally held the upper hand turned on Meng Hao, furious. At first, the battle had been quite simple, but once Meng Hao got involved, everything got complicated. He flew toward Meng Hao, murderous intent filling his face, clearly aiming to exterminate him. As he neared, Meng Hao's visage, meek, scholarly, and businesslike, suddenly changed, growing somber and stern. Just before the cultivator reached him, he took a step forward, his right palm slapping forward. Spiritual energy poured out with a bang. The cultivator flew back with a shriek, overwhelmed by the spiritual energy of Meng Hao's third level of qi condensation. The attack had struck him unconscious. Meng Hao snatched his bag of holding, and then his somber, stern expression changed, and he was once again the weak scholar. All the onlookers were shocked. "Brother, I believe you just offered me 6 spirit stones," he said shyly, looking a bit embarrassed. The other cultivator's face paled and his body trembled. He stared at Meng Hao with astonishment and terror. How could he ever have imagined that things would turn out this way? How could this apparently weak and feeble person have changed so much? It was almost as if what he had just witnessed was a dream. Chapter 12. Hello, elder sister Su. The scene, which had attracted the attention of the other nearby cultivators, caused their expressions to change. Many seemed to be at a loss, unsure of exactly what had happened. But now they all knew that Meng Hao was not someone to provoke. Even though they didn't know exactly what had happened, Meng Hao's first customer did. His heart pounding madly, he slapped his bag of holding and produced 6 spirit stones, which he respectfully handed over. He regretted having hesitated in front of the pill cultivation workshop in the past. By fretting over his spirit stones at that time, he ended up with no medicine, and now he didn't have any spirit stones to go buy anything for himself. Meng Hao accepted the spirit stones, produced a blood coagulation pill and skeletal relaxation pill, and gave them to the man. "Many thanks for your patronage," he said with a wide smile. "Come back again soon." Once again, he looked weak and feeble, but to the cultivator standing in front of him, he was a vicious beast in sheep's clothing. Trembling, the man made his exit. As he left, Meng Hao decided not to return to his spot on the rock. He grabbed the pill cultivation workshop outlet banner and began to stroll about the public zone. He stopped next to 2 battling disciples, sticking the banner into the ground. "Brother, it seems you're injured. You also seem somewhat listless. You don't seem to be in the right state to be fighting." The 2 disciples stared at him in amazement. Having just seen him knock someone out, they hesitated, and at the same time, both backed up a bit. "I happen to have some spirit refreshment pills from the pill cultivation workshop. Take one and you will be completely reinvigorated. Your victory guaranteed. Since today is our opening day of business, it only costs 1 spirit stone. How convenient." He continued to walk forward, his face filled with sincerity. "I already have some medicinal pills," said the man he had been giving his sales pitch to. He slapped his grab of holding and a spirit refreshment pill appeared, which he popped into his mouth. Upon seeing this, Meng Hao sighed. He had watched his first customer for some time to determine that he had no medicinal pills. With a light cough, he looked at the second man standing in front of him. The man gave a cold harumph, then produced his own medicinal pill and swallowed it, sighing inwardly. But Meng Hao wasn't disheartened. He circled back to the boulder, continuing to watch them. As time passed, they seemed to be looking worse and worse. Soon, it was clear they were out of medicinal pills, and the critical juncture in the fight had arrived. Victory and defeat would be decided. His spirits risen again, he hefted the banner and approached them again. "Brothers, the moment of life or death has arrived. You don't have any medicinal pills left, but don't worry, I have some right here. At this critical juncture, buy one of my soul congealing pills. It will restore your energy in a flash and even recover your spiritual energy. Brothers, you're not buying a pill, you're buying spiritual energy. Ayo, you're injured." Meng Hao's words distracted the cultivators. A flying sword hit one of them in the arm, sending out a fountain of blood. He retreated backward with a scream. Meng Hao was even faster than him, following and continuing his speech, looked as weak and scholarly as ever. "Brother, now is the time. You're bleeding profusely. Quick, buy a blood coagulation pill. If you don't, the danger is just too great." "Get out of here," the other opponent roared at 𝓲𝓪. He charged the injured opponent. "Give me a pill," the injured cultivator said, his face pale. Retreating several steps, he gritted his teeth and pulled out a spirit stone. A blood coagulation pill shot from 𝓲𝓪's hand onto the wound on his arm. The blood flow began to slow. He focused his attention, then leapt back into the fight. "Ayah, brother, it seems you're out of medicinal pills. Look, I have plenty. Now that your opponent bought one, he's bursting with energy. But you're injured. Why don't you buy a blood coagulation pill? Oh no, you got slashed again. You must be really tired. Take it slow, and don't be discouraged. Brother, I still have a skeletal relaxation pill. 1 spirit stone for 1 pill. You should buy pills quickly. The sages said, spirit stones have a price, but a life is priceless." 𝓲𝓪 slowly circled them. Sure enough, they were out of medicinal pills, and soon they began buying. Feeling pressure from each other, they bought quite a few. The battle became more serious. Their fighting today was more intense than 4 or 5 normal battles. Originally, it had been a fairly simple fight, but with the pill cultivation workshop outlet here, things were complicated. With dangerous fighting comes injury. The two cannot be separated. Flop, flop. The two men had finally exhausted every scrap of energy. They dropped to the ground, unconscious, spirit stones spent and medicinal pills eaten up. Even their magical items were destroyed in the battle, seemingly along with their wits. How tragic. As far as 𝓲𝓪 was concerned, he had saved their lives, or at least one life. Hefting his banner, he once again strolled around the plateau, and once again found 2 cultivators locked in devastating combat. From the look of it, even if they had healing medicine, it was gone by now. Eyes glistening, he stood the banner up next to them. "Brothers, your complexions seem bad, and you've received some serious injuries, but fear not, I have medicinal pills. 1 spirit stone, 1 pill. Your recovery guaranteed. How come you aren't saying anything? Don't tell me you don't trust me. Just now, another disciple bought some of my pills. The result for his opponent was death." Shortly, each of the men bought a pill, then again and again, until they had no more spirit stones. After much bitter battling, they ended their fight in a tie, with nothing to show for it except empty bags of holding. 𝓲𝓪 shook his head, picked up the banner, and found the new place to do business. By the time the sun set, 𝓲𝓪 had been everywhere in the public zone, selling medicinal pills. In the end, wherever he went, the battling would instantly cease, and the participants would leave. Eventually, 𝓲𝓪 stared out over the empty public zone. Contentedly patting his bag of holding, he left. It was late at night when he arrived at the insulin cave. He sat down cross-legged and excitedly began to take inventory of his spoils. 1, 2... He grew more and more excited as he counted. "Altogether, I have 53. I'm rich. This method is much faster than robbing people. It's also much safer. No need for killing. I don't have many medicinal pills left, so tomorrow I'll go to the pill cultivation workshop and buy some more. If I want the business to do well, I should buy out all of this month's healing medicine. If I don't have enough spirit stones, I'll just buy as much as I can. The scarcer the pills, the easier they'll be to sell." 𝓲𝓪 opened the bag of holding he had taken from the unconscious cultivator. Inside were a few spirit stones, 2 spirit condensing pills, and a pink-colored medicinal pill. He held the pill up and examined it. He recognized it as one of the pill cultivation workshop's cosmetic cultivation pills, an expensive pill. It was worth about 10 spirit condensing pills, and could be considered one of the most expensive products available. This pill is designed to maintain one's physical appearance. It would be a waste for me to use it on myself. He figured the previous owner must have been trying to ingratiate himself to a female disciple. Not thinking more on the subject, he put the pill into his bag of holding. As he was looking down contentedly at all the spirit stones and medicinal pills, the main door of the insulin cave suddenly creaked and began to open. It happened so quickly, 𝓲𝓪 had no time to gather up all his spoils. A woman entered the insulin cave, surrounded by a halo of moonlight. She was beautiful, but cold and expressionless. She wore a long silver robe that made it seem as if she had donned the moon itself. It was none other than the Reliance Intersect elder sister 𝓢h𝓪. As she entered the insulin cave, moonlight fell on the spirit stones and medicinal pills which lay in front of 𝓲𝓪. A sliver of astonishment suddenly cut through her cold demeanor. "Greetings, elder sister 𝓢h𝓪," said 𝓲𝓪, scrambling to his feet.
His right hand swept up the spirit stones and medicinal pills. He stood there, looking embarrassed. Elder Sister Shu didn't say anything. She just looked at Meng Hao, nodded, then turned to leave. Looking surprised, Meng Hao followed after her. Elder Sister Shu, you took the trouble to come here, why not stay a bit? There's no need, she replied coldly. I'll be going into secluded meditation starting tomorrow, and I just wanted to check in on you. She looked him over, then walked out of the cave. Meng Hao felt embarrassed, regretting having not collected up the spirit stones more quickly. In that case, he would have looked a bit worse off, and perhaps Elder Sister Shu would have been willing to help him out some more. At the same time, he felt a bit of warmth in his heart. Elder Sister Shu appeared cold and indifferent, but she had come here to see him, which meant she remembered him. His heart thumping, he slapped his bag of holding and produced the pink-colored medicinal pill. I've been wanting to thank you, Elder Sister Shu. I saved up quite a bit of spirit condensation pills so that I could trade them for this cosmetic cultivation pill. Please accept it. In my eyes, only you are worthy of such a pill. From the moment I entered the sect, I had a dream that you would stay young forever and be eternally beautiful. Without so much as a wink, he solemnly and respectfully held out the pill. Elder Sister Shu stopped walking and looked back at him. She glanced silently at the pill in his hand, then accepted it. Even though spirit condensation pills are common in the sect, they are only effective up to the 5th level of ki condensation. We cultivators place much importance on our cultivation base. We live in the world of cultivation, a place where life and death hang in the balance. You can't be like this in the future. You are intelligent, but you need to work more on your cultivation. This was the first time Meng Hao had heard Elder Sister Shu speak so much. As she spoke, he nodded respectfully. As long as Elder Sister Shu likes it, I'm willing to trade it for it, he said, lowering his head and blinking. He looked a bit shy. This pill, I'll accept it this time, but next time, don't trade your pills like this. She put the pill away, hesitated for a moment, then pulled out a pink-colored jade pendant, which she handed to Meng Hao. This is a magical item. You need to protect yourself. She began to walk down the mountain. Many thanks, Elder Sister Shu. Would you allow me to accompany you while you walk? I haven't seen you for so long, and I have some questions regarding cultivation that I hope you can clear up for me. He knew that this was an important opportunity. This was the only person he had to rely on, so he needed to get close to her. If he could walk with her through the outer sect and be seen by others, perhaps fewer people would be willing to mess with him in the future. Elder Sister Shu hesitated. She was an indifferent person and usually didn't say much. She had never spent time with male sect members, and it felt a bit strange to have Meng Hao standing there next to her. She was about to refuse, but after he finished speaking, she thought bashfully of the cosmetic cultivation pill he had given her, and she nodded quietly. The moon shone down gently on the two of them as they walked. Just then, at the peak of the North Mountain, a tall old man stood up, clad in a gray robe. As he looked down on the scene, a look of admiration appeared on his face. Excellent! This pup Meng Hao isn't bad at all. He truly grasps the correct interpretation of the Reliance sect. He knows how to find someone to rely on. And he also knows that if he protects his relationship with that person, that he will always have someone to rely on. This was the same old man who had expressed admiration for Meng Hao on pill distribution day. The more he learned about Meng Hao, the more he liked him. Chapter 13. Manly Qiaoyang. Elder Sister Shu was like a tiger pert which was worn while strolling about the outer sect would immediately attract attention. When the outer sect disciples saw Elder Sister Shu walking with Meng Hao, strange expressions filled their faces. This was especially true for those who had bought medicines from Meng Hao earlier that day. Hatred blossomed and then was held back. As for those with higher-level cultivation bases, they didn't know what had happened on the plateau, but they still recognized Meng Hao and conjectured that he was not someone to be trifled with. Actually, Meng Hao didn't know it, but he had become a rather famous person in the outer sect in the past 2 months. As far as he was concerned, the most important thing was getting through each day. Right now, it was night, and not many disciples were about. Not even half of them saw the scene play out.
Realizing that his opportunity was not easy to come by and should not be lost, he prattled on with some of his best humble scholar's words. He led taciturn elder sister Shu to the pill cultivation workshop, where the middle-aged man, both nervous and anxious, sold him all the various healing pills at a very low price. It would take months to restock the amount he took. They even went to the treasure bag. When elder sister Shu stared fiercely at the shrewd-looking man, his face grew pale. He surreptitiously slipped a spirit stone to 𝓲𝓪 and indicated that he could exchange the copper mirror at any time. 𝓲𝓪 gave a cold harumph, looking detested, and told him that he lost the mirror ages ago. The treasure bag brother laughed bitterly and apologized. He told him not to worry, that the mirror was lost in the past and was always found within 2 or 3 years. At the foot of the East Mountain, 𝓲𝓪 watched elder sister Shu walk off into the distance, surrounded by moonlight. That was the first time he realized that she was actually incredibly beautiful, like some sort of immortal goddess. Too bad she's so cold, otherwise I would think about marrying her. He fantasized idly for a bit, then gave a few dry coughs and headed back to the Insanto's cave. The night passed by eventlessly, and early the next morning, as the first rays of dawn appeared, 𝓲𝓪 energetically made his way to the plateau. I'm just a sliver away from the peak of the 3rd level of ki condensation. It's too bad I don't have the right medicinal pills. Demonic cores aren't easy to get, and I would have to go to that black mountain, which is just too dangerous. As he walked, an idea began to form. My goal now is to collect spirit stones. Then the next time I can get a demonic core, I will be able to make a massive leap of progress. If I can get to the 5th level of ki condensation, his heart began to thump and his eyes shined with anticipation. Being of the 5th level in the outer sect makes you a kind of lord, and most importantly, you can use the wind-walking technique. 𝓲𝓪 thought back to elder brother Wang Tang, how he was able to hover 7 inches off the ground, and his heart beat even faster. Soon, the plateau appeared in front of him, and he hurried forward. Looking every bit the humble scholar, he sat down cross-legged on the boulder. Soon, more and more cultivators appeared, including some who hadn't been there the day before. The sounds of battle filled the air, along with blood-curdling screams. 𝓲𝓪 scanned the scene, trying to pick out his first potential customer of the day. He didn't notice that in another part of the public zone, a man was carefully making his way through the crowd. The cultivator walked slowly, looking all around. Suddenly, his gaze fell on 𝓲𝓪 and his body trembled. He stopped walking. This was 𝓲𝓪's first customer of the day before. He had personally witnessed him knock down his opponent, then act bashful afterwards. He hadn't expected him to return today, yet there he was. How come he's still here? That swindler. His wares are simply too expensive. The cultivator felt both hatred and fear. Heaving a sigh, he was about to leave, when suddenly his eyes caught sight of a manly disciple entering the public zone. It's 𝓗𝓮. He's at the peak of the 2nd level, just a step away from the 3rd. His cousin 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵 is the first disciple in the low-level public zone. Thanks to him, 𝓗𝓮 can bully people and use despicable tactics to hurt people when fighting. People get angry, but won't say anything. If it were anyone else, people would have ganged up on him long ago. He didn't show up yesterday, so things went relatively smoothly. Today's going to be good. The cultivator moved a bit closer, convinced that 𝓗𝓮 would end up provoking the guy from the pill cultivation outlet. Considering he hated both of them, he looked forward eagerly to their misery. Some of the nearby combatants caught sight of 𝓗𝓮, and their expressions changed. They stepped aside quickly, afraid of incurring the wrath of the manly disciple. 𝓗𝓮 snorted. He was tall, tough, and stocky. His cold, hard stare was intimidating, as if the low-level public zone was his own backyard. Other than 2 or 3 people he didn't want to mess with, he looked down on everyone else. Frowning, he wondered why he hadn't seen his good friend Zhao Wugong lately. This made his mood sour, so he stalked about looking for a newbie to steal medicinal pills from. Then his gaze fell on 𝓲𝓪 and the big banner sticking up next to him. At first, he had barely noticed him, but then he saw the gloating cultivator watching on in the distance, and his interest was piqued. Go, quickly, said the cultivator under his breath.
He suddenly realized that watching the fighting was a lot more interesting than participating in it. Perhaps his mutterings had some effect, because Cao Yang rolled his eyes and then strode over to Meng Hao. People hurried to get out of his way. Meng Hao sat on the boulder, looking as resolute as usual, preparing to hawk his medicines. But as he saw Cao Yang approaching, he realized he could not accomplish his goal. He raised his head, feeling a bit of pity. This man was no stranger to him. He was the violent man he had seen a few days ago. Meng Hao sat there, a weak scholar. Looking bashful and a bit ardent, he said,
Brother, it's our second day in business. All pills are in stock and each one is essential for battle. Would you like to buy some? Cao Yang looked him over but was unable to estimate his cultivation base. If a person's qi condensation level is below the 7th, then unless they intentionally emit spiritual energy, their cultivation base will be motionless, and it is impossible to see how powerful they are. Only at the 7th level of qi condensation does it become visible to others. Therefore, he had no way to know Meng Hao's level. When I buy things, I don't need to spend money. Hand over all your medicinal pills and spirit stones. If you dally, I'll snap your neck. His eyes flashed, and his tone was utterly forceful and domineering. After all, this was the low-level public zone, and everyone here revered him. His cousin was 𝓢h𝓪𝓵. As far as he was concerned, Meng Hao was nobody. Off in the distance, Meng Hao's first customer watched the proceedings eagerly. Beat him to death, he said quietly. Even he didn't know which party he was referring to. Brother, the sages said it is not good to steal, said Meng Hao delicately. Look, let's discuss things a bit. I'm running a business here, but I haven't even opened shop yet. How could I have any spirit stones? Sages? On this plateau, I am the sage, said Cao Yang, feeling even more confident after hearing Meng Hao speak. If I want to beat you, who will stop me? If I want to cut you to pieces, who would even utter a peep? Assuming Meng Hao was scared, he laughed heartily and took a step forward. He was very close now, and his eyes radiated insolence. Brother, I didn't do anything to provoke you. Furthermore, I'm not in the public zone. Look, I'm outside the borders. Pulling a long face, Meng Hao stood on the boulder, trying to speak reasonably. You really can talk crap, said manly Cao Yang impatiently. If I say you're inside, then you're inside. He stepped past the banner, then swiped his hand at Meng Hao. What a bully! When he saw manly Cao Yang's hand moving, Meng Hao's countenance flickered, and he seemed to change into a different person. As Cao Yang moved forward, so did he, and his right palm shot out. A bang sounded out. Then a horrific scream came out of manly Cao Yang's mouth, followed by a fountain of blood. His body flew back some distance, his face filled with astonishment. His cultivation level was higher than that of the cultivator Meng Hao had struck yesterday, so he didn't lose consciousness, but pain racked his body. Even as he attempted to struggle to his feet, Meng Hao appeared next to him and kicked him viciously into the ground. The sages said, if you take things without paying, you're courting death. I told you I'm running a business and I haven't opened shop yet. I don't have any spirit stones. As he spoke, he continued to ruthlessly trample Cao Yang. The manly man's shrill, miserable screams sounded out over the plateau, punctuating every single word Meng Hao said. He protected his head with his hands, rolling about. Soon, footprints covered his green robe. I told you I was outside the public area, not inside, said Meng Hao furiously. The manly man's horrible cries began to grow weak, and it seemed that soon he wouldn't even have the energy to cry out at all. The onlooking cultivators all seemed to suck in their breath, looking at Meng Hao raging in all his fury. A few of them had been present the day before, and they started to think that they had struck it lucky. The one who understood things the most was yesterday's first customer. Looking at manly Cao Yang screaming and watching Meng Hao's fierce expression as he jumped up and down, he suddenly began to sweat and quiver. The longer he watched, the more he felt that Meng Hao was truly frightening and dangerous. It appeared that Cao Yang was about to lose consciousness. The shadow of death seemed to float over him. His vision began to grow dim. Then he rose up his left hand, trembling. In it was a spirit stone. I'll buy some medicine, he cried. He mustered all his strength to cry out as loud as possible, apparently afraid that Meng Hao wouldn't hear him.
Meng Hao stopped, his foot in midair. His fierce expression flickered away, replaced by the innocent scholar's. With a genial smile, he took the spirit stone. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" He helped 𝓤𝓮 to his feet, brushing the dusty footprints off his robe. His manly body trembled, and he stared fearfully at Meng Hao. Looking at him, 𝓗𝓮 wanted to leave immediately, to get as far away as possible from the demon in human clothing. As of now, he was just like the cultivator from yesterday. "Brother, looking at your current state, I think one medicinal pill will only help you temporarily." He gripped 𝓤𝓮 by the shoulders. He seemed to stop in consideration for a moment. "You have a lot of enemies. Why don't you buy some more?" Upon hearing this, 𝓤𝓮's body went stiff. It wasn't just him. Everyone backed up, looking at Meng Hao in dread. "Buy some more?" said 𝓤𝓮, shaking, his voice weak. Were it not for Meng Hao holding him up, he would have toppled over. "One pill, one spirit stone," said Meng Hao affably. He retrieved several anti-hemostasis pills from his bag of holding. "I'm honest with all customers, brother. Please rest at ease. I won't take advantage of your misfortune to raise prices. Just ask any of the brothers nearby. The pill cultivation workshop outlet reputation is quite good." Seeing all the pills, 𝓤𝓮's face paled. And then he looked at the amiable expression on Meng Hao's face and his back went cold. Heart trembling, he gritted his teeth. "Brother, you can really tell the good from the bad. These are genuine pill cultivation workshop products." As he spoke, he produced some blood coagulation pills and held them out. 𝓤𝓮 looked at the medicinal pills with a start, then glanced bitterly at Meng Hao's bag of holding. He looked back at Meng Hao's face and saw it filled with care and concern. 𝓗𝓮 wasn't stupid, and he understood Meng Hao's intentions. The blood drained from his heart. But right now, his life was the most important thing, and he had no other options. He took out more spirit stones from his bag of holding and reluctantly handed them to him. Meng Hao took them with a smile, then placed the medicinal pills into 𝓗𝓮's hand one by one. In a short period of time, the spirit stones in 𝓗𝓮's bag of holding had been replaced by a pile of medicinal pills. 𝓗𝓮's heart bled even more. Looking pained, he trembled. Then he saw that Meng Hao still held 5 pills in his hand, and a look of shock and desperation filled his face. "Those other pills should be enough to help you recover. These 5 are after that to help you maintain your health." He spoke considerately as he gazed at 𝓗𝓮. "I don't have any left. I really don't," said 𝓗𝓮, looking at Meng Hao, about to cry. Meng Hao said nothing, looking as amiable as ever. 𝓗𝓮's scalp tingled. Gritting his teeth and ignoring his own distress, he pulled out several magic items, including flying swords, magic wands, spirit condensation pills, and the like. "I have no spirit stones, only these things," he said desperately. "Magic items are also acceptable," said Meng Hao, taking them and putting them into his bag of holding. Moments later, 𝓗𝓮, carrying his bundle of medicinal pills, hobbled off, supported by the arms of some fellow disciples. Meng Hao patted his bag contentedly. It was only morning, and he had already sold out. He decided it was best to quit while he was ahead, so he collected his flag and told the remaining cultivators he would see them tomorrow. Conversations broke out as he strode down from the plateau. Half a month flashed by, during which Meng Hao grew to be quite famous among the low-level disciplines. They all knew about the pill cultivation workshop outlet on the plateau. Even more talked about was the owner of the shop, who looked like a delicate scholar but who had an explosive temper. Rumors spread. One afternoon, 𝓗𝓮 walked out of his house, his face pale. Despite his poor complexion, his wounds had healed. The pills he had bought from Meng Hao at an exorbitant price were actually quite effective in helping him to recover. He had hidden away for the past half-month, and today was the first day he had been able to walk around. He looked hesitant at first, but finally walked through the outer sect until he reached an area with few buildings. He stopped in front of one of them. 𝓗𝓮 requests an audience of elder brother Lu, he said outside, clasping his hands in front of him respectfully. Sitting inside, cross-legged, was a man of about 30 years of age wearing a green robe. He was not a handsome man, but had an appearance of excessive arrogance. His eyes flickered open, and he looked out at 𝓗𝓮 appraisingly. "What transpired?" he said coolly. "Well, elder brother Lu, I was robbed a few days ago," 𝓗𝓮 blurted out, feeling nervous. People outside said that elder brother Lu was his cousin, but in reality, they were not related. Elder brother Lu usually meditated in seclusion and did not really care about 𝓗𝓮 at all. He knew that whenever 𝓗𝓮 had some hardship, he would come calling. Hearing his words, elder brother Lu seemed a bit annoyed. "Who was it that robbed you?" he asked coolly. "It was an outer sect discipline named 𝓗𝓪," replied 𝓗𝓮.
𝓗𝓪, elder brother Lu thought for a moment. "He's completely ignorant and incompetent," said 𝓗𝓮 hatefully, "but he opened up a shop on the plateau hawking medicinal pills to disciples who get injured in battle." "Hawking medicinal pills?" said elder brother Lu with a frown. His eyes flickered. "Yeah, now he's one of the most famous disciples in the low level. He opened up that shop and then forces people to buy from him. Now everyone is complaining and ashamed to be associated with him at all. They all despise him. He's aroused the wrath of heaven and earth. I beg elder brother Lu to administer justice." Anger covered 𝓗𝓮's face as he thought about his own wretched experience that day. Actually, elder brother Lu didn't care at all about the things 𝓗𝓮 had just said, and yet his eyes shone. "My cultivation base has reached this level because of all the low-level disciples I robbed. How come in all my years in the Reliance sect I never thought to open a store and hawk medicinal pills?" He sighed and slapped his thigh. Upon hearing the noise from inside, 𝓗𝓮 stared in confusion at the building, not sure what it meant. He didn't dare to ask. Moments later, elder brother Lu sent him away with no assurance whatsoever that he would aid him in seeking vengeance. The following morning at dawn, 𝓗𝓪 headed toward the plateau carrying his banner. He was in a good mood. He had grown accustomed to walking the path to the plateau. When he reached it, he sat down on the boulder. As soon as he appeared, the faces of the other cultivators on the plateau grew pale. In the past half-month, they had been tormented by 𝓗𝓪 until they were completely dispirited. But if they didn't come, how could they rob from other disciples? Killing outside of this area was not permitted, so they had no choice but to come. What they usually did was stop fighting as soon as 𝓗𝓪 showed up. But people's killing spirit would inevitably arise, animosities would be stoked. Even though 𝓗𝓪's business had slowed a bit, he still made profit. It is worth mentioning that ever since 𝓗𝓪 opened his shop, there were much fewer deaths. He was quick to point this out, and it had become a key feature of his sales pitch. As usual, 𝓗𝓪 looked about for potential customers. He thought to himself that this really wasn't the best method. The shopkeepers in 𝓗𝓪 County always had assistants. Even as a new idea was coalescing in his mind, he caught sight of a man in the distance, about 30 years old. He looked extremely arrogant, and in his hand he held a banner which looked just like 𝓗𝓪's. Written on the banner were several large characters. Pill Cultivation Workshop Outlet Number 2. This was 𝓢h𝓮𝓪, the #1 disciple in the low level. His cultivation base was similar to 𝓗𝓪's, just a hair away from the peak of the 3rd level. 𝓗𝓪 glanced at him, then paid him no attention. Of course, there would always be imitators in business, although 𝓗𝓪 wasn't too pleased with the name on the banner. The other cultivators on the plateau looked at each other for a moment, then went back to their fighting. About an hour later, 𝓗𝓪 caught sight of 2 combatants. He hurried over and planted his banner next to them. At the same time, 𝓢h𝓮 hurried over and planted his banner. As the 2 banners were planted, the combatants dripped with cold sweat. For their part, the people standing there were very powerful. Normally, 1 would be enough to make them uncomfortable, but here were 2 standing there, staring. "Brother, buying a medicinal pill will ensure your safety. 1 spirit stone per pill. I treat all customers fairly." "Buy Lu's pills, they're just as effective," said 𝓢h𝓮 from the other side. He looked at the 2, murderous intent flashing briefly in his eyes. The 2 combatants trembled down to their guts, having lost any desire to fight. They produced spirit stones and handed them to 𝓢h𝓮 and raced off. 𝓗𝓪 frowned. This was clearly robbery, and if things went on like this, the public zone would soon be empty. That wasn't his desire. By afternoon, 𝓗𝓪's business had dropped significantly. Other than an order in the morning, he sold nothing at all. 𝓢h𝓮, who didn't care a bit about right and wrong, forced people to buy. If they didn't buy, then he attacked them. Soon the plateau was completely empty. 𝓢h𝓮 looked down at the dozen or so spirit stones he had acquired. He looked cool and indifferent on the outside, but inside he burned with excitement.
This really is a good business. If I had thought of this before, I wouldn't have been made fun of for robbing so many lower-level disciples. If only that 𝓲𝓵 weren't here. I'm sick of him. He had not come because of 𝓗𝓮, of course, but rather to imitate 𝓲𝓵's business model. Now that he had a taste of it, he wanted to have the monopoly. He looked murderously at 𝓲𝓵. I'll practice for a few more days, then kill him. The next day, thanks to 𝓢h𝓮's powerful reputation as the #1 disciple in the low level, few people showed up in the public zone. Those who did show up were the ones who hadn't been there the day before. They had no choice but to buy medicinal pills. 𝓲𝓵 wasn't willing to do business like 𝓢h𝓮, so he didn't get any orders. The more 𝓢h𝓮 looked at 𝓲𝓵, the more his murderous intent grew. By evening of the third day, when 𝓲𝓵 was making his silent exit, he heard 𝓢h𝓮's arrogant voice from behind him. The few people present all heard. "If I see your banner tomorrow, I'll cripple your cultivation base." 𝓲𝓵 stopped for a moment. He said nothing, but his eyes filled with cold power. He stalked off, returning to the 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵's cave. "You're the one who copied me," said 𝓲𝓵, his eyes fierce. "Then you stole my business like a turtle dove stealing the nest of a magpie. Then you say you'll cripple my cultivation." Thinking of the murder in 𝓢h𝓮's eyes, 𝓲𝓵 pushed open the stone door of the second room in the 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵's cave. Instantly, thick spiritual energy began to pour out. 𝓲𝓵 sat down cross-legged. He absorbed the several months of accumulated spiritual energy. As dawn approached, he opened his flashing eyes. He had experienced a breakthrough. No longer was he a hair from the peak of the third, he was at the peak of the third level. Now he was just a step from the fourth. But that step was not an easy one. The higher your cultivation base, the more difficult it was to progress, especially to the 5th and 7th levels. Those levels were often bottlenecks, extremely difficult. 𝓲𝓵 frowned, grit his teeth, and forced himself to open the bag of holding and take out all of the spirit condensing pills he had earned recently. Then he used 𝓗𝓵 mystical ability along with all his valuable spirit stones to duplicate even more spirit condensing pills. Spirit condensing pills were of limited use, but with a large amount, there would be some effect. Each time he used this method, its effectiveness would be reduced. "If I don't cripple him first, he will destroy me tomorrow." Without hesitation, he popped the pills into his mouth. The spiritual energy in his body lacked a bit, so as a huge amount of spirit condensing pills dissolved, his body began to shake. He felt his cultivation erupt like a flood. His mind hummed, and his consciousness faded a bit. When things grew clear, his eyes glittered, and yet he still had not reached the 4th level of ki condensation. He ground his teeth. With no other choice, he duplicated more spirit condensing pills and swallowed them. Once, twice, 3 times. His mind vibrated violently as if it were being smashed by turbulent waves. Then there was a bang, and his eyes grew blurry. Massive amounts of filth oozed from his pores, and as it did, 𝓲𝓵's vision slowly grew clearer, his body cleaner. After about an hour, his eyes glittered dazzlingly, and he was completely clear-headed. The 4th level of ki condensation. He felt his cultivation rolling like a massive river. As he rotated it, it sounded like a roaring tempest, astonishing and frightening. His expression calm, he retrieved 5 flying swords from his bag of holding, spoils from the past half-month. They were all products of the 𝓢h𝓪𝓵, standard issue, and all looked exactly the same. There were some other magical items he had procured. He heaved a deep sigh, then closed his eyes and began to meditate, awaiting daybreak. After entering the sect and beginning my cultivation practice, I had no choice but to rob some people to improve my cultivation. But I don't want to hurt too many people. Thus, I came up with the idea of running a business. But now my business has been stolen away and I've been threatened with crippling. That is pushing things too far. When dawn broke, 𝓲𝓵 opened his eyes and left the 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵's cave. He washed, then headed straight for the plateau. Chapter 15. Decisive Attack. Dawn. The plateau. Considering months of 𝓲𝓵's hawking and days of 𝓢h𝓮's domineering, there were few cultivators present, especially this early in the morning. There were only 2 or 3 sitting there cross-legged. When 𝓲𝓵 arrived, they opened their eyes, and each of them sighed inwardly, wondering when things would return to the way they had been before. Moments later, they gaped in astonishment. 𝓲𝓵 didn't enter the plateau, but instead sat outside, cross-legged, eyes closed. He remained there, unmoving. This strange sight left them astonished. They looked at each other, then seemed to remember something, whereupon they began to gloat. Time passed, and soon it was late into the morning. More and more people arrived on the plateau, and every single one noticed Meng Hao and his unusual behavior. People began to make guesses about what was going on. Everyone was so intrigued that none of them fought. Could it be that elder brother Lu's words really worked? Meng Hao is too scared, so he doesn't dare to hawk goods? It must be. Elder brother Lu is the #1 disciple in the low level. If he tells you to beat it, then you have no choice but to beat it.
Who would have thought that this guy was so scared for his own skin? All he can do is bully people lower than him. Look at how arrogant he is. He thinks that just because he didn't bring his crappy banner, elder brother Lu will let him off the hook. Many of them were like this. They wouldn't complain when being robbed by someone powerful, but if someone who looked weak and kind took their items through business, they would complain endlessly. 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵 had been in power for quite a while, from his first vicious attack long ago, all the way to today when he forced people to do business with him. Everyone was helpless, and yet they had no choice but to deal with the situation. In fact, many of them believed he had become a bit gentler recently. Meng Hao hadn't been in the sect for very long, and was neither very powerful nor arrogant, so even though his business was conducted gently, everyone complained relentlessly. Meng Hao heard all of their talking, but his expression remained as neutral as always. Of course, his reason for sitting in meditation outside the public zone was not because he didn't want to enter, but rather because his cultivation base was now at the 4th level of ki condensation and he couldn't enter if he wanted to. In the midst of all the discussion, someone appeared at the bottom of the mountain. He wore a green robe, looked to be about 30 years old, and wore an incredibly arrogant expression. It was 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵, slowly approaching, his hands clasped behind him. As soon as he appeared, Meng Hao's eyes opened, and they shone brilliantly. Everyone watched as he stood up and slapped his bag of holding. A small white sword appeared. The sword aura glistened, pressing down with a cold pressure. Meng Hao charged forward, and the sword aura made a beeline for 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵. As soon as this happened, a buzz of conversation arose. Everyone was amazed at Meng Hao's lack of fear. Was he really going to cause trouble for the #1 low-level disciple 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵? He's going to battle 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵. They were going to fight sooner or later. Meng Hao injured 𝓗𝓮 and 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵 wrecked his business. This battle was unavoidable. I just never imagined Meng Hao would dare to attack like this. I think he doesn't know his own limitations. Elder brother Lu has been at the 3rd level for years. Meng Hao will definitely lose. Even as Meng Hao dashed forward, 𝓢h𝓮's eyes glittered. He'd already planned to take Meng Hao's head if he saw him today, and now his opponent had dared to take the initiative. It was actually helpful. He snorted, and his body seemed to turn into a rainbow as he sped toward Meng Hao. His right hand slapped his bag of holding. A purple-colored flying sword appeared. When the flying sword appeared, it was accompanied by a piercing whistle, and it radiated a golden purple color with a diameter of approximately 30 meters. It's elder brother Lu's purple Zhang sword. It is. I heard he was awarded the purple Zhang sword by the sect for some special service he did. It's mystically sharp. 2 people, 1 mountain. At the foot of the mountain, they charged each other. Amid a reverberating roar, 𝓢h𝓮's expression changed and blood spurted from his mouth. He flew back several paces, staring at Meng Hao in shock. 4th level of ki condensation. Meng Hao looked a bit embarrassed. He had just entered the 4th level of ki condensation, and his grasp of it was not firm. He could not release its full power. He made a simple attack, filled with ferocity, but cracks were already visible on his flying sword. His opponent's weapon was magically sharp and had damaged his own weapon. Even though Meng Hao didn't have much experience in fighting, in his half-year or so hunting for wild beasts in the mountains, his reaction speed had grown. Moreover, during his days on the plateau, he had observed many battles. Even as 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵 retreated backwards, he moved forward, slapping his bag of holding. Another flying sword appeared next to the cracked one. The 2 sword auras merged and shot toward 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵. As he sped forward, Meng Hao's fingers flickered and tongues of flame congealed all around him. 3 paces away, a flame serpent appeared, as thick as his arm, about half a meter long. It twisted in the air, then emitted a roar and shot toward 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵. Looking shocked, 𝓢h𝓮 spit blood from his mouth and moved backwards anxiously. His eyes flashed with anger.
He knew that because he had some magical items and Meng Hao had just entered the 4th level, the outcome of this battle was not certain. But if he could exterminate Meng Hao, it would build his prestige. Murderous intent flickered in his eyes. His fingers danced, whereupon a globe of glistening, radiant water appeared in his hands. He threw it out, whereupon it exploded, transforming into countless water arrows, which then shot toward the flame serpent. His fingers moved again, and the purple Zhang sword slammed into Meng Hao's 2 flying swords. A booming sound resounded, like iron being crushed. Meng Hao's 2 flying swords crumbled into pieces, whereupon the purple Zhang sword followed the water arrows toward the flame serpent. With an echoing roar, the flame serpent disappeared into a cloud of dust. The water arrows became a mist, and the purple Zhang sword returned to 𝓢h𝓮. Its golden purple aura did not shine as quite brightly, and the crack had appeared on its blade, but it was still as sharp as ever. With a 4th level ki condensation like that, and no good weapon, killing you isn't going to be hard. How many times can you use your flame serpent art like that, considering you're not at the 5th level? In his heart, 𝓢h𝓮 was worried about his flying sword, but outside he put on a broad smile. He didn't take a single step back. Your sword might be incredibly sharp, but let's see how many times you can use it. And speaking of flying swords, I have some more too. And that's for the 5th level of ki condensation. With all the medical pills Elder Sister X gives me, it won't be long before I break through. He showed no expression on his face, but inside he was extremely nervous. Every single flying sword was equal to a silver stone. He waved his right hand, and yet another flame serpent appeared, roaring and twisting through the air. It flew toward 𝓢h𝓮. Meng Hao shot toward the retreating 𝓢h𝓮 like a rainbow, accompanied by the flame serpent. Yet another flying sword appeared, and in an instant it was a meter away from 𝓢h𝓮, its sword aura glittering with death. "You forced me to do it," shouted 𝓢h𝓮, his hair in disarray, his clothes spattered with blood. From the day he had entered the sect until now, he had never been in such a bad situation. His eyes burned. With a growl, he tore open his robe, revealing a jadeite bottle gourd hanging from his neck. He poured into it all of the spiritual energy he could muster. The jadeite bottle gourd began to glow brightly, and the droning sound filled the air. In the air in front of 𝓢h𝓮, the image of a massive bottle gourd appeared, many times larger than the one hanging from his neck. It was about half the size of a person. Actually, 𝓢h𝓮's cultivation base was not strong enough to fully activate the bottle gourd. The flickering image seemed as if it could dissipate at any moment. Before it could fully coalesce, 𝓢h𝓮 spit a mouthful of blood and retreated backwards again, his face deathly pale. And yet, he still glared at 𝓢h𝓮 with frenzied, murderous anger. Even though the bottle gourd was not complete, the pressurized spiritual energy inside caused Meng Hao's expression to suddenly change. Then, the illusory bottle gourd emitted a thunderous roar, and the thick green beam shot from its mouth, slamming through the flame serpent and inundating Meng Hao. "This is a magical item given to me by elder brother Wang Tang. It can be used when one reaches the 4th level of ki condensation. But you're just looking to die, Meng Hao, so you forced me to use it early, and I've had to pay the price. You're definitely dead this time." 𝓢h𝓮 started to let out a wild laugh, and yet the laugh couldn't leave his mouth. He felt as shocked as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared in astonishment. The green beam slammed into Meng Hao, pushing him back about 10 meters. However, it was blocked by a pink shield which surrounded Meng Hao's body. When the green beam dissipated, so did the pink shield. It shrank into a pink jade pendant which Meng Hao held in his hand. Cracks covered its surface. He gripped the jade pendant, cold sweat dripping down his back, fear lingering in his heart. If he hadn't taken out the jade pendant Elder Sister Shu had given him, he would have been destroyed by the fearsome power of the bottle gourd. What magical item is that? Meng Hao looked at the jadeite gourd bottle hanging from 𝓢h𝓮, who was clearly severely injured. He leaped forward and snatched the gourd bottle, immediately putting it into his bag of holding. "That was given to me by elder brother Wang Tang Fei. If you dare to steal it, you will have to deal with his wrath." 𝓢h𝓮's countenance sank, and he began to tremble. He was filled with astonishment, never having imagined that the bottle gourd would be ineffective against this opponent. "The sect rules state that if you take something into your hand, it is yours," said Meng Hao. He hesitated for a moment, but then decided that the bottle gourd was too powerful. He wouldn't give it back. Enmity had been created which would be difficult to abate. Hatred in his heart, he stared coldly at 𝓢h𝓮. "This isn't the public zone," said 𝓢h𝓮, his eyes filled with despair and fear. Raising his voice so everyone could hear, he said, "If you dare to kill me, it will be a violation of sect rules." "I, 𝓗𝓪, will not violate sect rules. However, you said yesterday that you would cripple my cultivation base, so today I will do the same to you." Looking completely calm, he raised his hand and sent a flying sword piercing into the key passages of 𝓢h𝓮's dantian, smashing his cultivation base. Then he stood there amidst 𝓢h𝓮's miserable screams, casting fear and awe across the entire plateau. Chapter 16. Come here. The faces of the surrounding cultivators grew pale. 𝓗𝓪's attack was both decisive and also filled with a ferocious hatred that he didn't even notice. This sort of thing was actually becoming a trend. In the eyes of the onlookers, 𝓗𝓪 was now the #1 person of the plateau. Perhaps in the entire outer sect, he was now one of the highest figures. Many of the cultivators thought back to the past half-month. With the cultivation base so high, 𝓗𝓪 could have robbed and taken at will. True, the customers of his shop weren't happy, but he did treat them mildly. Now people began to look at him with awe. There was no fighting on the plateau that day. After 𝓗𝓪 left, the news of 𝓢h𝓮's cultivation base being broken spread like the wind. The fact that he mentioned Wang Tangfei's name was especially talked about and caused the news to spread even faster. By nightfall, everyone in the outer sect had heard about what happened, and by this point, everyone knew who 𝓗𝓪 was. The East Mountain, covered with wisps of colorful clouds, was the Reliance sect's tallest mountain and also the inner sect's base of activity. It had more spiritual energy than the other mountains and was where sect leader 𝓗𝓪𝓵 went for meditative seclusion. Back in the heyday of the Reliance sect, the 4 peaks had been fully occupied by the inner sect. Disciples of the 7th level of key concentration abounded. Now, only the East Mountain was occupied by disciples 𝓲 and 𝓗, whereas the other peaks were abandoned. On the East Mountain there was an Immortals Cave which was much larger than 𝓗𝓪's. It was actually the finest Immortals Cave in the entire Outer Reliance sect, rivaling even the dwelling places of the inner sect disciples. Inside was a spirit spring that was anything but dried up. It gurgled out dense, fragrant spiritual energy. Of course, among all the disciples of the Reliance outer sect, the only one qualified to occupy such a place was the blessed Wang Tangfei. He sat cross-legged in his white robe, with his face placid, looking at 𝓢h𝓮 kneeling in front of him. His face was pale white, and his body trembled. His cultivation base had already been destroyed by 𝓗𝓪. "I beg Elder Brother Wang to administer justice," he said with bated breath. "He's beyond cunning, more than you can imagine. He's going to flee the sect." Every time 𝓢h𝓮 saw Elder Brother Wang, he could not help but feel that the other man was perfect, beyond ordinary. That feeling had grown stronger and stronger over the past 2 years in which Wang Tangfei's cultivation base grew more and more powerful. "If he flees," said Elder Brother Wang after a while, resplendent in his perfection, "it will be a violation of sect rules, and I will send some people to kill him." He wore an amiable smile that would cause anyone to like him, and spoke with a lightness that caused him to seem even more noble. 𝓢h𝓮 had nothing more to say. He kowtowed, his face filled with entreaty, his body trembling uncontrollably. "Very well," said Wang Tangfei. "His methods are too vicious. An example should be made. I shall prevail upon Elder Brother 𝓮𝓪𝓵 and make a trip over there, although I will be careful not to offend Elder Sister 𝓲. 𝓗𝓪 shall cripple his cultivation base, distribute his treasures, and sever an arm and a leg. That shall be his apology. Good enough?" He spoke as if he held sway over every single matter within the Reliance sect, as if with a single word he could take command of 𝓗𝓪's cultivation base as well as his arms and legs. His smile was as amiable as ever, perfect, without flaw. "My profound thanks. This fellow, he's just filled with viciousness." 𝓢h𝓮 ground his teeth, his heart filled with enmity. "Then I shall expel him from the sect," said Wang Tangfei coldly, as if he were talking about an incredibly insignificant matter. "He can go off into the wilds, and things will take their natural course." At the same moment, 𝓗𝓪 sat cross-legged in the Immortals Cave in the South Mountain, looking at the jadeite bottle gourd in his hands with a dark expression. Having broken through the 4th level of ki concentration, then fighting that battle, he had consumed almost all of his spiritual energy. There was nearly none left. At least he had obtained the magical gourd. It seemed as though everything had gone smoothly since his entrance into the Reliance sect, but actually, it was mostly because of his quick wit and foresight. If it had been anyone but him, he would most likely have put his life in danger on his first pill distribution day. Later, he acquired the protection of the copper mirror and its mysterious power. Shortly after that, elder brother Zhao began to lust for his immortal's cave. If he hadn't died, Meng Hao's situation would have been bleak, and he would have lost control of all of his belongings. That was the first time he had killed someone. If he hadn't started doing business with his shop, he wouldn't have been able to arrive where he was now. But the wind that seemed to propel him from behind also held concealed within it hardships that he was unaware of. Everything that had happened was like the thunder of an approaching storm. Meng Hao looked down quietly at the jadeite bottle gourd, thinking about the #1 disciple in the outer sect, the blessed 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵. Thinking of him in all his perfection, Meng Hao felt as if the pressure of an entire mountain had come to rest on his shoulders. He almost couldn't breathe. He wanted to flee, but he knew he was not a servant, but a sect disciple. Fleeing was a violation of sect rules. That would arouse the notice of the sect elders, and he would surely lose his life. If I'd known earlier that 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵 had 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵's backing, muttered Meng Hao. Moments later, unswerving determination filled his eyes. I would do the same thing. If I didn't attack him, he would have killed me. I didn't force him, he forced me. The grudge would have built either way. Unless I had run into 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵 earlier and been willing to let him rob me, things would have ended up this way. Even if it came down to killing, I couldn't prevent people from coveting my business. His eyes flashed as he looked gloomily around the Immortal's cave. It's too bad elder sister Shu was meditating in seclusion. The first thing he had done after crippling 𝓢h𝓮's cultivation base was going looking for her, but he had been informed that the intersect that parties in seclusion were not to be disturbed. This jadeite bottle gourd, it was incredibly powerful, so much so that when he tested it out with his cultivation base, it exploded out with a might that sent his heart thumping. He can only imagine how it could help him. Maybe now he would finally be able to break through to the 5th level of ki concentration. The strange thing is that the gourd bottle could not be placed in his bag of holding, but rather had to be hung on his body. Sadly, he had no more spirit stones. He had used all of them to break through the 3rd level of ki concentration. Otherwise, he would try to make a copy of the gourd bottle. This sect is not of the mortal world. It's easy to lose one's life here. If I can prevent disaster by handing over the gourd, maybe I should just do it. He did not wish to do so, but it seemed he had no other choice. Even as he wrestled with these thoughts, a sinister voice drifted in from the dark night, past the sealed door of the Immortal's cave. I am Songguan's sword, here to assist elder brother Wang in meeting justice. Meng Hao, please come out of the Immortal's cave and kowtow to me. The dark voice seemed to fill the cave with icy cold shadow. Meng Hao's eyes glittered, and he lifted his head. He didn't look the least bit surprised. He anticipated that someone would come looking for him. Meng Hao was silent for a moment, then slowly said, It's late at night, not a convenient time. Elder, if you have something to say, just say it. How haughty, said the voice, clearly displeased. A cold snort rang out. Meng Hao did not say anything, maintaining his silence. If you won't open the door, very well. I shall convey elder brother Wang's instructions. Meng Hao, disciple of the outer sect, has not focused wholeheartedly on cultivation. He has caused disturbances in the low-level public zone, arousing mass complaints from fellow disciples, and has used vicious methods on others. However, he is young, so these offenses cannot be considered worthy of the death penalty. Hand over your treasures, cripple your cultivation base, and leave the sect. Henceforth, you are not a disciple of the Reliance sect. As Meng Hao listened to the sinister voice, his face grew somber. Then, when he heard the final words, it filled with indignation.
Elder Brother Wang's decrees are not according to sect rules, said Meng Hao defiantly. Elder Brother Wang's word are the sect rules, said the person outside, indifferent to Meng Hao's interruption. The following day is pill distribution day. You will kowtow to 𝓢h𝓮𝓪𝓵 and apologize, then await your punishment.
With that, the man flicked his sleeve, turned, and left. Meng Hao sat in silent contemplation. Time passed and dawn approached. His eyes were bloodshot. He could not figure out what to do. His opponent obviously wanted the jadeite bottle gourd, and to see him dead. Out of supposed to mercy, he would cripple his cultivation base, sever an arm and a leg, and then expel him from the sect into the wild mountains. If that happened, he would truly be hopeless. "What should I do?" he said, fists clenched, eyes red. He suddenly felt completely weak and helpless. This was the first time he truly wished he were more powerful. If he were more powerful, he wouldn't be bullied like this. He thought some more. "Don't tell me my only option is to flee?" His eyes filling with determination, he lifted up his head and walked out of the immortal's cave. But even as he walked out, he stopped in his tracks, hesitating. "No, this isn't right." He lowered his head for a moment in thought, then turned back into the immortal's cave, where he sat down cross-legged. The following morning, Meng Hao opened his bloodshot eyes. He had not practiced any breathing exercises, but had spent the whole night in contemplation. But his cultivation base was simply too low. He couldn't think of any method other than fleeing the Reliance sect. But surely his opponent had considered that he would do that. Fleeing was the same as death, and then he would be remembered as a traitor. Bells rang out in the distance. Pill distribution day had arrived. Meng Hao knew that even if he tried to hide away in the immortal's cave, catastrophe would still befall him. The law of the jungle. All of my problems are because my cultivation base is too low. A true man doesn't just take the suffering, he does something about it. He gave a small sigh. He had been pushed to the brink and had no room to maneuver. He calmed himself, then straightened out his clothing. He looked around the immortal's cave, then opened the main door and stared out at the blue sky and the emerald sea of trees. Some time passed, and then he stepped forward. He had only taken a few steps when he noticed a person walk out from the jungle behind him, staring at him coldly. "You didn't flee, so you weren't stupid after all." Meng Hao recognized the person's voice. It was 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵's song. It turned out he had stayed behind. Meng Hao had seen him before. He was one of the disciples walking with Wang Tangfei that day by the East Mountain. His grandfather was one of the sect elders. He clearly had stayed behind to see if Meng Hao would flee. If he had, he would have been branded a traitor and would have forfeited his life. Meng Hao turned and headed toward the outer sect. 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵 laughed coldly, his eyes filled with ridicule. Actually, he had left the previous night to go call on his grandfather 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵. Had Meng Hao chosen to flee in the night, he would have been entrapped and suffered a horrible death. 𝓲𝓮𝓪𝓵 followed Meng Hao the entire way. When they arrived at the outer sect, other disciples caught sight, one by one, and many different expressions filled their faces. Regardless, it appeared as if all had expected this, and none seemed to pity Meng Hao. Most actually jeered at him. Soon he arrived at the outer sect square. The dragon-carved pillars glowed brightly, and disciples were everywhere. Off in the distance, he saw white-robed Wang Tangfei surrounded by a crowd of disciples. The sun shone down on his white robe, making it shine like snow, and his long hair trailed past his shoulders. He looked perfect, flawless, like an immortal being from a painting. His bearing made people want to get to know him. He really looked like a chosen. He chatted amiably with the disciples around him, friendly with everyone, regardless of their cultivation base. He would nod, giving tips about cultivation, causing everyone to treat him with utmost respect. The female disciples all seemed to be infatuated with him. They looked as if they needed to be at his side, as if his each and every action could drive them crazy. Even the sect elders on the tall platform gazed down on him fondly and with admiration. Wherever Wang Tangfei went, he became the center of attention. His good looks, his gentleness, his perfection melded together into a dazzling glow which burned Meng Hao's eyes. He clenched his fists tightly.
As all the disciples arrived and as the pill distribution concluded, gentle and cordial 𝓲𝓪𝓵 didn't even look once at Meng Hao. He knew Meng Hao was watching him, but it meant no more to him than if a cricket was looking at him. He wouldn't stoop so low to return his gaze. When everything concluded and the dragon-carved pillars grew dark, 𝓲𝓪𝓵's gentle voice filled the air. "Come here." It was a simple sentence, but the instant it rang out, everyone looked at 𝓲𝓪𝓵, watching as his gaze fell onto Meng Hao. Chapter 17. I shall rely on myself. Meng Hao stood there stiffly, staring at 𝓲𝓪𝓵. He could suddenly feel the gaze of all the disciples who stood in the square. The cultivator standing next to him moved away, creating an open area around Meng Hao. A feeling of aloneness filled his heart, as if the world itself were about to forsake him. It was as if 𝓲𝓪𝓵's single utterance had pushed him over the edge of existence. No one spoke a word. The outer sect disciples just looked at Meng Hao. 𝓲𝓪𝓵 was too famous. His words reverberated in everyone's hearts. No one was surprised at what was happening. News of yesterday's events had spread, and many people had already guessed what would happen this day. The sect elders remained unmoving upon the high platform, gazing down at Meng Hao. "The law of the jungle," said Meng Hao, forcing the words out one word at a time. He knew that compared to 𝓲𝓪𝓵, his voice was laughably weak and small, and that he might be attacked, but he still spoke up. He knew that if he took out the jadeite bottle gourd, handed it over to 𝓲𝓪𝓵 and made some tearful entreaties, then 𝓲𝓪𝓵 couldn't reject his apology. Not in front of all these people. He might exact some punishments, but would leave Meng Hao with his cultivation base. Maybe if he begged and kowtowed, admitted that he was in the wrong, accepted the humiliation, and even insulted himself, then he would be completely out of danger. But Meng Hao would never do such a thing. Call him stupid and crazy, but he would never do it. Even though he knew he was facing a dire calamity, he would never beg. He would never humiliate himself, never crawl on the ground and plead. Never. This was his spirit, his integrity. Some things in the world are more important than life or death, and that noble, unbendable, unbreakable spirit is dignity. That was why he had spoken first, one word at a time. Even though his opponent was the mountain like 𝓲𝓪𝓵, even though he faced dire calamity, even though the whole world was against him, even though he was alone with no one to rely on, despite all this, he still had his dignity. He lifted his head up and spoke. This was Meng Hao. His words seemed to galvanize all the energy in his body. Death? What is death? So what if I haven't even lived to see 17? You can humiliate me, you can cripple my cultivation, but you can never make me yield. You can never break my spirit. His voice had rung out in the silence, clear and distinct, yet filled with certain loneliness. As he spoke, his bitterness was plain, but perhaps only Meng Hao himself could understand it. His hands clenched into fists. No one else could sense it, but along with 𝓲𝓪𝓵's words had come an invisible attack that attempted to force Meng Hao to collapse. His body seemed as if it was about to disintegrate, his bones about to shatter. He felt a massive pressure trying to force him to kneel. His body shook, but he gritted his teeth and stood there, ignoring the pain in his bones. An exceedingly dark look filled his eyes, and he clenched his fists harder. His fingernails dug deep into the flesh of his palms. With his usual kind smile, 𝓲𝓪𝓵 took a third step forward, landing directly in front of Meng Hao. He waved his finger a third time, and a force like a giant invisible hand ripped open Meng Hao's clothing, revealing the jadeite bottle gourd hanging around his neck. The invisible hand snatched the gourd bottle, wrenching it away from Meng Hao and depositing it in 𝓲𝓪𝓵's palm. Meng Hao's face grew pale, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. His body trembled, yet he couldn't move. Veins of blood appeared in his eyes, and his hands were clenched incredibly tight. He felt the pain of his fingernails digging deep into the flesh of his palms. Blood began to drip out between his fingers and drop to the ground.
Cripple your cultivation base. Sever an arm and a leg. Leave the sect. 𝓲𝓪𝓵 continued to smile, his warm voice reverberating across the square. He extended a finger for the 4th time, pointing toward Meng Hao's chest. Meng Hao glared back at 𝓲𝓪𝓵. This entire time he had only spoken once, never opening his mouth to say a second sentence. He did not scream or roar, but remained silent. More veins of blood appeared in his eyes, and he clenched his fists even tighter. Because of the power he exerted, his fingernails snapped, lodged in his flesh. Blood dripped like rain. Everything grew silent as people watched, their faces filled with derision. Their ridicule seemed to cut him away from the world, pushing him away until he was placed outside of everything. And yet, he still would not submit. What was a bit of physical pain? Just as 𝓲𝓪𝓵's finger was about to fall again, a sound rang out from a distant mountain peak, and a gentle power appeared next to Meng Hao, blocking the crippling finger. A bang rang out. 𝓲𝓪𝓵 flicked his wide sleeve and glanced to the side. An old man stood there, wearing a long gray robe. He had some mottled brown marks on his face, and though quite tall and big, didn't appear to be very mighty. This was the same person who had admired Meng Hao on the 2 previous occasions. "You've taken the treasure back," said the old man. "Let the matter drop." With a frown, he looked at Meng Hao standing there, silently, blood dripping from his fists. He sighed, then looked back at 𝓲𝓪𝓵. "Since it is Grand Elder Ouyang interceding, Junior will give in." 𝓲𝓪𝓵 smiled, looking indifferent. During the entire time, he had only spoken to Meng Hao twice. Sunlight shone down on him, illuminating his elegant figure, his long hair, his perfect demeanor. As far as he was concerned, Meng Hao didn't even match up to an insect. As of this moment, he'd already placed Meng Hao out of his mind. Meng Hao, covered in blood, was like a bug standing up against an elephant who could crush him with a single step. To 𝓲𝓪𝓵, the things that had just happened were nothing. It was not that he felt contempt toward Meng Hao, he just didn't care about him in the least bit. With a smile, he walked back into the crowd, chatting indifferently as if nothing had happened. He began to give pointers to lower-level disciples, emanating cordiality. All the female disciples seemed obsessed with him. The other cultivators viewed him with utmost respect. Everyone ignored Meng Hao as if they had already forgotten about his existence. Meng Hao was like the antithesis of 𝓲𝓪𝓵. Covered in blood, his clothing in shreds, he cut a truly sorry figure. Meng Hao could sense what 𝓲𝓪𝓵 thought of him. It wasn't scorn, it was disregard. As 𝓲𝓪𝓵 left, Meng Hao felt a bit more relaxed, although his body hurt so bad it seemed he might collapse. Gritting his teeth, he saluted Grand Elder Ouyang with cupped hands. Without another word, Meng Hao coughed up another mouthful of blood, clenched his jaw, and slowly walked off. His feet felt as if they would disintegrate at any moment. He was soaked with sweat, and every step caused heart-rending pain. Looking like a whipped dog, he slowly disappeared into the distance. As he walked off, Grand Elder Ouyang seemed to be about to say something, but decided not to and simply watched him depart. Meng Hao returned to the Înselden cave, and the instant the main door closed, he collapsed to the ground unconscious. 𝓲𝓪𝓵 was at the peak of the 6th level. There was no way for Meng Hao to compare to him. By refusing to give in and kneel, he had of course received internal injuries. He was comatose for 2 full days, after which he finally opened his eyes, his body racked with pain. It was difficult to move, but he lurched up into a sitting position. When he touched the ground with his hands, they burned painfully, as if the skin had been stripped off of them. Gasping huskily, he sat there quietly in the middle of the Înselden cave. After some time passed, he looked down at his hands. 10 broken fingernails protruded from the skin of his palms. After 2 days of coma, scabs had formed over the fingernails, but in his struggle to sit up, they had broken, and now blood oozed out. Meng Hao looked at his hands expressionless. After a while, he began to dig the broken fingernails out of his skin, one by one.
Blood flowed out of his mangled palms, dripping to the ground and filling the cave with the scent of gore. Through the entire process, Meng Hao's facial expression did not change. It was as if the hands didn't belong to him. There was a certain ruthlessness within him that was now clearly visible. He looked down at the 10 bloody fingernails. After a while, he collected them together and placed them next to the stone bed in the room. He planned to look at them every day as a reminder of the humiliation he had endured. The day would come when that humiliation would be repaid in double. He hadn't spoken for a long time, but now he opened his mouth. "As for me, I shall rely on myself." The hoarse voice almost didn't sound like his own. Chapter 18. The Fatty of the Outer Sect. Time flashed by. Meng Hao didn't even take half a step outside of the 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵 cave. He didn't want to go out and didn't want to see anyone. He could never forget how 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵 had turned the whole world against him. He sat cross-legged, staring at the fingernails, encrusted with dried blood. His previous numbed expression changed into wrath, then somberness. Finally, one day, the main door of the 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵 cave creaked open, and moonlight poured in. Elder Sister X stood there in the doorway, wreathed in moonlight which obscured her features. Meng Hao didn't say anything, and neither did she. Time passed. Finally, she said, "I ended my secluded meditation just yesterday." Meng Hao saluted her with clasped hands. 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵 has an important background. He's not from the state of 𝓊, and his cultivation base is at the 6th level of key condensation. The sect elders have already selected him to be promoted to the inner sect. You must not provoke him. "Junior understands," said Meng Hao with a smile. His expression appeared to have returned to his usual state, as if he had abandoned any brooding about what had happened, although deep in his eyes existed something that never before appeared in his 16 years of life. It was a cold light he kept buried so deeply that only he could sense it. Others were clueless. "However," said Elder Sister X, "if he causes any more trouble for you, all you have to do is smash this slip and I will sense it, even if I'm meditating in seclusion." A moment passed, then she waved her hand and a purple-colored jade slip appeared next to him. "Of the 4 people I brought to the mountain that day, you are the first to be promoted to the outer sect. Your companion who you worked with in the North Servants' Quarter is being promoted today. Tomorrow at dawn, he will arrive in the outer sect to register." With that, she turned to leave. "Many thanks, Elder Sister. I have a question I wish to ask. I was hoping Elder Sister could explain. My cultivation base is at the 4th level of key condensation. Considering my latent talent, how long do you think it will take to reach the 7th level? To reach the 4th level of key condensation in less than a year seems to indicate that you have had quite a bit of good fortune in your cultivation. You don't need to explain the details, and I won't ask. Without such fortune, it might take 10 years at the fastest. At a slower rate, it could take half of a 60-year cycle. The 4th, 6th, and 8th levels are all bottlenecks, especially the 6th. Without a bit of good fortune, it's difficult to break through to the 7th. It's like that for everyone? For everyone. Then she was gone. Meng Hao sat down cross-legged with a sharp look shining in his eye. An hour later, he stood up and left the 𝓗𝓮𝓪𝓵 cave for the first time in days. The seasons were changing again, and it seemed autumn would arrive within a few days. The leaves were beginning to change color and wind drifted across the mountains and valleys. Beneath the bright moon, Meng Hao made his way along a small path into the wild mountains. Everything was quiet, and the only thing that could be heard was the gentle rustle of falling leaves as Meng Hao made his way toward the North Mountain. He wanted to go see Fatty. In the entire sect, he was his only friend. The North Servants' Quarter was quiet this late at night. As he approached, he heard the sounds of snoring filling the air, a special kind of snore that he had grown to accustom to in his 4 months as a servant. The horse-faced young man who presided over the North servants sat cross-legged on the large boulder. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Meng Hao, surprised for a moment. Then he rose to his feet and saluted Meng Hao with clasped hands. "Greetings, elder brother Meng." Rumors about Meng Hao had been abounding recently, and of course the horse-faced young man had heard them. "No need for the formality, elder brother," said Meng Hao. "I'm here to see an old friend." Taking a look at the horse-faced young man's cultivation base, Meng Hao could see that it was the 3rd level of key condensation. It appeared as if it had been stuck there for several years. Elder brother Horseface nodded. After Meng Hao stepped foot into the servants' quarter, he sat back down cross-legged, with a strange expression on his face. With a silent sigh, he closed his eyes again. Meng Hao walked into the courtyard and found the East 7th house. As he approached, the sounds of Fatty snoring filled the air. As soon as he entered, a strange expression filled his face, and the antsy feeling that had been filling his heart recently began to dissipate. Fatty lay there on his back, snoring away. The other bed in the room had been pushed away from the wall, forming a small gap.
There in the gap, sound asleep, was the big man who called himself Grandpa Tiger. Even though he was asleep, his face seemed contorted in fear, as if he had encountered something terrifying in his dreams. His wooden bed was covered with a multitude of bite marks. In some places, it was chewed all the way through, so much so that it seemed it might fall apart. The wooden table was long gone, and Meng Hao imagined that it must have been completely eaten up. Even the walls had bite marks on them. In sharp contrast, Fatty's bed remained biteless. The big man in the corner shivered, then let out a miserable cry. He was obviously in the throes of a nightmare. Given his emaciated appearance and the dark circles under his eyes, it seemed he hadn't been sleeping well lately. Meng Hao could only imagine the wretched circumstances that had tormented him into this state. It seemed his cry had awakened Fatty, who sat up looking annoyed, then saw Meng Hao. He suddenly grew excited. "Wild chicken! Did you bring any wild chicken?" Meng Hao looked at him, unable to hold back his smile. He was as round as ever, apparently having not lost even a bit of weight. In fact, he looked a bit fatter. His teeth had also grown longer, by about half. When he talked, they glittered brightly. "I heard you reached the first level of key condensation," he said with a smile, "so I came to see you. I was in such a hurry that I didn't have time to grab a chicken." He sat down on the bed next to Fatty, examining his teeth. Fatty, proud of his cultivation base, began to talk. Meng Hao didn't say much, instead listening to Fatty's garrulous chatter. Soon, the moon began to fall and the sun began to rise. The wounds in Meng Hao's heart also began to dissipate, leaving behind only scars. The fingernails in the incensal's cave and the cold look in his eyes fused within Meng Hao to create a more mature look. At dawn, Meng Hao left with Fatty. Grandpa Tiger watched them go, tears streaming from his face. His tears moved Fatty, and before they could leave the courtyard, he ran back, gave him a hug, and then said something. Whatever he said caused the big man's face to grow pale and his body to tremble. "What did you say to him?" asked Meng Hao when they were just about to reach the outer sect. "He is a good person. After you left the servants' quarter, he became my friend. He was so upset at me leaving, I just couldn't take it." A pained expression appeared on his face. "I told him that I would definitely come back often to visit. He looks tough," continued Fatty emotionally, "but he's actually a bit of a coward. He always has nightmares when he sleeps. Poor guy." Meng Hao didn't say anything, nor did he ask anything else about the man. As the two of them walked through the outer sect, people looked at Meng Hao, their expressions strange, as if measuring him up. Seems you really roiled things up in the outer sect, Meng Hao," said Fatty excitedly. "Everyone's looking at you." In his mind, he figured that few people would be willing to bully him since he had Meng Hao at his back. Meng Hao smiled, but didn't explain. When they were almost to the treasure building, Meng Hao stopped walking. He watched Fatty approach the building. In the amount of time it took for half an incense stick to burn, Fatty returned excitedly. In his hand, he carried a short sword, covered with a layer of fish-like scales. It wasn't the least bit sharp, but instead rough. "See the treasure I got, Meng Hao? It's truly a great treasure." He waved the sword in the air, and Meng Hao was just about to ask what it could possibly be used for when Fatty opened his mouth and started filing at his teeth with it. A scraping sound could be heard, and Meng Hao wasn't sure whether he should laugh or cry. "It's great," said Fatty, sounding more and more excited. "My teeth keep getting longer, and I'm constantly looking for things to file them down. But whatever I find always breaks within a few days. I can use this treasure to file them down forever." Meng Hao showed Fatty around the outer sect. He even offered to let him stay with him in the incensal's cave, but Fatty refused. He had been living with a roommate for too long and had been looking forward to having his own place in the outer sect. No matter what Meng Hao said, he refused. When they arrived at his house, he looked completely content. Meng Hao didn't push him.
When the night was deep, he returned to the incensal's cave and sat down cross-legged. Time flew, and soon 3 months had passed. 2 months before, 𝓮𝓵 had reopened his stall by the low-level public zone. Perhaps because of what had happened with Wang Tang, no one caused any problems for him, and soon his business picked up again. Soon he added magic items to his offerings, and business grew even more. But now there was more than one person in the company. At his side was a fat teenager who constantly filed his teeth with a flying sword. He had a good sense for business and constantly hawked wares in the public zone. Soon he was the main force in the business. With the cooperation of 𝓮𝓵, who could not enter himself, they made quite a tidy profit. One day, when winter had fallen and snowflakes filled the air, 𝓮𝓵 sat cross-legged at the edge of the plateau, meditating. Suddenly, Fatty let out a yelp and grabbed the person, dragging him toward 𝓮𝓵. 𝓮𝓵, 𝓮𝓵, look who it is! Chapter 19. The Wind Stirs Again. 𝓮𝓵 opened his eyes and saw Fatty excitedly dragging over a young man. Short, sallow, and emaciated, he made quite a contrast to pale, plump Fatty. 𝓮𝓵 recognized him. He was one of the members of the group who had been brought to the Reliance sect that day and taken along with Wang Yuchai to a servant's quarter on a different mountain. At that time, he looked strong and good-natured, but now he seemed gloomy and in poor circumstances. However, there was a certain hardness in his eyes that spoke of some unforgettable experiences in the outer Reliance sect. And furthermore, he dared to enter the public zone at only the first level of key condensation. "Greetings, elder brother Meng," said the young man, looking a bit excited, but then it disappeared, and he made an extremely respectful salute to 𝓮𝓵 with hands clasped. "Did you just enter the sect?" 𝓮𝓵 asked, thinking back with a sigh for his own first days. "It's been about a month," he said, lowering his head. "What about Wang Yuchai?" "He died," said the young man, a numb expression on his face. After the words left his mouth, a look of grief appeared in his eyes. "Wang Yuchai died?" said Fatty in shock. 𝓮𝓵 maintained his silence. "In the servants' quarter, we were responsible for drawing water. Big bro Yuchai thought I was too young, so he helped me a lot. Once on a mountain road, a powerful gust of wind hit us and knocked him off a cliff. I looked for his body for 2 months, but could only find some broken bones. He must have been eaten by wild animals." A look of sorrow appeared on Fatty's face, and 𝓮𝓵 let out a sigh. The 4 of them arrived at the same time, but in less than a year, one was already dead. 𝓮𝓵 felt bad, and even worse when he remembered that Uncle Wang, the carpenter, only had 1 son. "Little Tiger, you stick with us. With 𝓮𝓵 around, no one will dare bully you." Fatty clapped the young man emotionally on the shoulder. "No, that's okay. I'm fine." The young man seemed to hesitate, and 𝓮𝓵 could tell that he was thinking about something. In the end, he shook his head and refused Fatty's offer, saluted them with clasped hands, then made his way away from the plateau. "What's the deal with him?" asked Fatty, still in shock. "Everyone has secrets," said 𝓮𝓵 slowly. "Perhaps he made some lucky break that he doesn't want to talk about. Otherwise, why would he come here at only the first level of key condensation?" 𝓮𝓵 seemed to be lost in thought as he watched the young man disappear into the distance. "Even if Little Tiger has some secret, we could still find it out on our own if we wanted. He's looking down on us," Fatty brooded. He had an open and straightforward personality and didn't think in scheming ways. To offer someone something in good faith and be turned down this way obviously raised his indignation. In the lower regions of the lands of South Heaven, winter was short and passed almost in an instant. The warmth of spring arrived and the flowers bloomed. It was once again April. A year had passed since 𝓮𝓵 had arrived at the Reliance sect. With Fatty's help, he had accumulated quite a bit of spiller stones from the low-level public zone, and even more medicinal pills and magical items. He would often go into the wild mountains to hunt for demonic beasts. He even roamed close to the Black Mountain in his search, but always came up empty-handed. The roars which emanated from the Black Mountain region grew more and more intense, so 𝓮𝓵 didn't dare to enter. He had 1/3 level demonic core that he duplicated multiple times with the copper mirror. Eventually, its cultivation base reached the middle of the 4th level, but then his progress virtually ceased. No matter how many medicinal pills he consumed, the only thing it did was make his spiritual energy a bit more pure. He had reached the bottleneck and could not break through to the 5th level and his much-desired wind walking. With Fatty's help, Fatty reached the second level of key condensation, which left him feeling quite awe-inspiring. That April, all outer sect disciples higher than the fifth level, as well as elder sister 𝓲 and elder brother 𝓗, were dispatched out of the sect. They each returned with 2 or 3 youths who possessed latent talent, who then became servants. Once per year, that was the sect rule. This was the only way to ensure the continuation of the sect's existence. The spring wind blew across the land, taking the cold along with it. Heat returned. Soon, autumn arrived, and then it was October. During this period of time, 2 important things happened in the Reliant sect. The first was related to one of the sect's grand elders. Other than the sect leader, who everyone said had already reached the core formation stage, there were 2 other grand elders who had reached foundation establishment. One of them, who had reached the end of his longevity, passed away while meditating at around 150 years of age. When 𝓮𝓪 caught wind of this, he asked around and confirmed that it had not been Grand Elder Ouyang. When cultivators reach foundation establishment, it expands their longevity to 150 years. That seems like a long time, but it is actually a very intense period. If the cultivator cannot reach core formation, then in later years they can only sit in meditation, shriveling up, their chi and blood slowly dissipating. However, after reaching core formation, longevity is then doubled to 300 years. Because of the Grand Elder's death in meditation, the Reliant sect was put in a bad position. It was already in a weak standing in the state of Zhao and was now in even more danger. Suddenly, cultivators from other sects began to appear near the Reliant sect's borders. They seemed to be searching for something, so the Reliant sect set up defensive spells around the mountain. Everything within several thousand meters fell under their protection. Figurative storm clouds appeared, dark and thick, pressing down on the entire sect. Most disciples in the outer sect had their guesses. Some of them were more informed than others and received bits and pieces of information. News spread, and soon a rumor developed that Patriarch Reliance, who had been missing for 400 years, was stirring up the cultivating world of the state of Zhao. As for the details, none of the outer sect disciples were sure. During this time, 𝓮𝓪's cultivation base continued to be stuck in the middle of the 4th level. Nothing he did seemed to have any effect, and finally he grew to accept that he was stuck in a bottleneck. He sat cross-legged in the Insomniant's cave, frowning. Elder Sister 𝓲 told me that breaking through from the peak of the 4th level into the 5th level would involve a bottleneck, but why did my bottleneck come early? Is it really because I consumed too many demonic cores? If that's the case, I need some medicinal pills especially designed for breaking through bottlenecks. Or perhaps I need some high-level demonic cores. He had quite a collection of spirit stones, but lacked the appropriate medicinal pills. He was confident that if he just had the right medicinal pills, he could break through to the 5th level of chi condensation. The anxiety in the Reliant sect was palpable. Many disciples walked to and fro with troubled hearts, trying their best to hide their feelings. 𝓮𝓪 felt the nervousness too, and of course he was dealing with his own critical matter. The only person who seemed happy was Fatty. He was even more enthusiastic about their stall on the plateau than 𝓮𝓪. Even when 𝓮𝓪 didn't feel like going, he would take the banner there himself to do business. 3 days later, bell sounded. Pill distribution day had come. When 𝓮𝓪 and Fatty arrived at the square, 𝓮𝓪 caught sight of a golden-robed old man on the platform, behind whom stood elder sister 𝓲 and elder brother 𝓗. Seeing this, 𝓮𝓪's heart began to thump, and a fire burned in his eyes. In the past year and a half, Master Uncle Shangguan has only appeared 3 times, and each time was an individual pill distribution. My cultivation base has been stuck in the middle of the 4th level for almost a year. If there is a high-level medicinal pill? Other outer sect disciples had similar thoughts, and soon conversations buzzed in the air. Of course, some disciples were thinking, "Please don't give it to me."
Especially because after what Meng Hao did with his pill that time, the sect had made a new rule that prohibited gifting individual distribution pills to members of the inner sect. It's a dry spirit pill. It is a dry spirit pill. There was one distributed last year and now one more. Only one per year. That just shows how valuable it is. If I can get my hands on it, I will definitely have a breakthrough in my cultivation base. A louder buzz of excited talk arose as the golden-robed old man lifted the glowing purple pill into the air. When the pill appeared, Meng Hao's eyes shone with a brilliant intensity. He had never before wanted a medicinal pill so much. In his eyes, it was not a medicinal pill, but his only hope of breaking through to the 5th level of qi condensation. He had been a member of the sect for a while now, so he was now familiar with the various disciples. The inner sect had elder sister Shu and elder brother Chen, both of whom were at the 7th level of qi condensation. Rumor had it they would break through to the next level very soon. Under them was Wang Tang, who was stuck at the peak of the 6th level of qi condensation. To him, a dry spirit pill would be of little use. Besides him, there was one more disciple of the 6th level, the number 2 disciple, Han Zong. He had seen him twice and had pegged him to be wildly arrogant, someone who considered everyone to be beneath his notice. If he were here, he wouldn't even cast a glance at the dry spirit pill, just to show that he had a collection of even better medicinal pills. As for disciples of the 5th level of qi condensation, there were 4 in the outer sect, and they could be considered to be virtual lords. They were rarely seen, as they often secluded themselves in meditation or traveled about the wild mountains in training. There weren't many disciples of the 4th level. Including Meng Hao, there were 7 in total. As for those under the 4th level, they might as well be bugs. Very well, quiet down everyone. Wizened Shangguan Shu's voice reverberated out, as astonishingly powerful and suppressive as ever. However, compared to last year, Meng Hao wasn't as powerfully affected. Instead, his eyes shone with determination. In the past 2 years in which I have presided over pill distribution, I usually prefer to select a new disciple. The reason is that if we can continue to get new disciples, our sect will flourish. He smiled and his eyes swept across the crowd. Just when it seemed he had made his decision, his eyes fell upon Fatty, who stood next to Meng Hao filing away at his teeth with a sword. His face looked indifferent. He looked as round as a ball, and anyone who first saw him filing his teeth with a sword would find it hard-pressed to decide whether to laugh or cry. Shangguan Shu stared in amazement, then laughed. "Never mind, I'm going to give the pill to you." He waved his right hand, and a purple light flickered as the dry spirit pill shot toward Fatty. With a look of shock, he instinctively caught it, looking as if he didn't even know what had just happened. Then his expression changed, and he let out a yelp. His body began to tremble as the blood drained from his face. He looked like he was about to cry. Me? Crap, why did it have to be me? Chapter 20. Entering the Black Mountain. In a split second, everyone in the entire square suddenly began to stare at Fatty, making him feel like a cold wind was creeping down his back. His body quivered, and he looked pitifully at Meng Hao, a weak smile on his face. "Meng Hao, save me." He wanted to throw the pill away, but for some reason it wouldn't leave his hand. He was so frightened that as people began to surround them, his teeth chattered. As the lights faded, he trembled violently. Then the lights were gone, and the restrictive spell released. Before Fatty could say anything, Meng Hao sent out a booming flash of his 4th level cultivation base, then grabbed Fatty by the robe and charged away. "Give me the pill," Meng Hao said in a low voice. "You go back to the Insomniant's cave and hide." Without hesitation, Meng Hao tossed him the cave's Yade slip. Fatty threw him the dry spirit pill as if it were a hot potato. Meng Hao's body flashed as he sped forward with Fatty in tow. Behind him, howling and roaring sounds arose, as 10 or more people raced in hot pursuit. "Damn it, it's Meng Hao, you can't escape. Hand over the dry spirit pill. As a fellow disciple, I'll show you some mercy and not kill you. Otherwise, you'll have a tough time escaping death."
Meng Hao didn't stop for a second. After emerging from the edge of the outer sect, he tossed Fatty away from him. Fatty was a matter-of-fact kind of person, but he wasn't stupid. As soon as he landed on his feet, he let out a miserable shriek. "Pill thief!" he screamed, clutching the Jade slip close to him as he ran off, trying not to look suspicious. He dashed toward the Insomniant's cave at top speed. Hearing this, the pursuers ignored him and continued after Meng Hao. "Flee to the ends of the earth. You won't survive the next 24 hours. You're of the 4th level and you still don't give me the pill?" Among the 10 or more pursuers, most were of the 4th level and only 2 were of the 5th level. The rest were of the 3rd level, obviously hoping to be able to take advantage of the situation. Cold sword auras whistled behind Meng Hao as over 10 flying swords descended like rain, but he was determined to keep the dry spirit pill. "I just have to endure for 24 hours, then the pill will be mine," he said, determination shining in his eyes. "Then I will finally be able to break through to the 5th level of chi condensation." He increased his speed. After spending so much time hunting for demonic beasts in the wild mountains, his top speed was not inferior, and he was much more familiar with the mountainous regions than most other fellow disciples. Thus, upon leaving the outer sect, he raced towards mountains. Glancing behind at the approaching sword auras, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding to produce a medicinal pill, which he immediately swallowed. Then he sent his own flying swords shooting backwards. Bang, bang, bang! Several trees were hit by the powerful flying swords and exploded into pieces, which flew about everywhere. Some smacked painfully into Meng Hao. Absorbing momentum from the explosion, he shot away several meters. Before he could land on the ground, 4 flame serpents and 3 water globes shot toward him. 2 of the flame serpents were almost 18 meters long and as thick as a person, and emitted an intense heat which caused some of the nearby trees to catch fire. Those would be the work of the 5th level disciples, who were also the fastest of the bunch. Their feet didn't even touch the ground as they flew toward him like the wind. Savage looks filled their faces. Actually, they didn't hold the slightest bit of compassion even for each other. As far as they were concerned, the only competition involved were the 2 of them. Meng Hao didn't count for anything. Without hesitation, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding again. 2 flying swords appeared and rotated around him, then came to rest beneath his feet. Then they shot forward, carrying him nearly 30 meters before he lost his balance and fell off. The short movement enabled him to evade the flame serpents and gain some distance. Furious howls reverberated in the air behind him. This was a technique Meng Hao had come up with himself. It wouldn't work for long, only a few seconds, but at least it helped him to gain a bit of advantage on the 2 5th-level cultivators. If I were of the 5th level of chi condensation, I would have the wind-walking technique. Then I could stay on the flying sword for a lot longer, and I could get away more easily. Sadly, this isn't really flying. Even more than ever, he desired to reach the 5th level of chi condensation. Not looking back, he sped along. Actually, the path he chose was not random. The instant the dry spirit pill landed in Fatty's hands, his mind had been racing at top speed. He had picked the wild mountains because his destination was none other than the Black Mountain inhabited by demonic beasts. After thinking about it for some time, he had decided that his best advantage was the copper mirror. With the mirror, he would still have a good chance of surviving the area even though it was dangerous and contained that ominous roaring beast, especially if people followed him in. "If these guys chase me into the Black Mountain, then I'll be forced to kill them." A harsh expression appeared on his face. He had been a part of the Reliance sect for a year now and was no longer the weak scholar he had once been. He didn't appear to have changed much on the outside. He was a bit taller and his skin was as swarthy as ever, but his heart was filled with decisiveness. Especially after the matter with Wang Tang, he knew that he could only rely on himself. The only true path was to become stronger. In the world of cultivation, the law of the jungle prevails. One must conduct oneself with caution and decisiveness. They pursued him relentlessly. Sword auras glittered. Before long, the 2 5th-level cultivators had almost caught up with him, their eyes filled with murder. Just now, Meng Hao evaded their attack using a single special move. Other than Wang Tang and Han Zong, they were like high lords in the outer sect, so they found this particularly humiliating. They had acted at the same time, and yet Meng Hao still managed to evade, which they both found hard to accept. Now they wanted more than ever to slay him. As far as his sword-riding technique, they didn't give it a second thought. Any cultivator of the 4th level could do that, but considering their cultivation base, doing so would be a waste of spiritual energy, even if it gave some extra speed. Seeing Meng Hao use the technique, they sneered. Using such tactics would sap his spiritual energy sooner rather than later. "Let's see you escape this time," they shouted, glancing at each other. One of them suddenly shot forward like a huge bird. In midair, he waved his hand, and 2 massive roaring flame serpents shot down toward Meng Hao. The other continued to pursue Meng Hao. The 2 of them created a pincer attack, one in the air and one on the ground, ready to seal Meng Hao's fate in death. "You still won't accept death?" grinned one of them hideously, his murderous intent filling the air. Meng Hao's expression didn't change. He gave a cold snort. He dared to snatch the dry spirit pill, so of course he had some special techniques prepared. He slapped his bag of holding, flicked his sleeve. 6 flying swords appeared, and their sword oars interlocked, then whizzed outward, away from Meng Hao. Boom! Meng Hao let out a small shout of pain which reverberated into the mountains. When the 2 pursuing cultivators heard the explosion, they gasped with astonishment, unsure of what had happened to produce such a sound. Amid the thunderous roar, Meng Hao spat out a mouthful of blood, and yet his body shot away into the distance. Behind him, the effects of the attack dissipated, and the flame serpents collapsed with blood-curdling screams. The 5th level cultivators had no choice but to retreat a few paces, covered in dirt, their faces filled with disbelief. Damn it, what ruthlessness! He detonated 6 flying swords at once! No wonder he opened a store. How many flying swords does he actually have? The 2 of them each sucked in a breath, but did not hesitate. Using the full speed of their wind-walking, they raced in pursuit again, unwilling to let Meng Hao intimidate them. According to their estimations, Meng Hao could not have that many flying swords left. Even if he opened a store in the low-level public zone, he couldn't possibly have so many magical items. "This time, you will die for sure." The 2 pursuers increased their speed, entering the wild mountains. At this point, the pursuing 4th-level disciples caught up. One of them was Wang Tang's friend Xiangwan Song. His cultivation base was at the peak of the 4th level of qi condensation. His face was grim. He secretly feared Meng Hao's speed, and yet he continued to pursue. Time gradually passed by, and soon an hour had passed. Meng Hao continued forward, maintaining the distance from his pursuers. Several times he came into danger, but each time he produced a flying sword, detonated it, and escaped. This left the pursuing 5th-level cultivators dumbstruck. They moaned to themselves, never having imagined that Meng Hao would have so many flying swords. At this point, he had detonated nearly 12 of them. Combined with his sword-riding technique, his speed of evasion was quite high. Damn it! Even if he has more flying swords, I can't believe he'll produce many more. At any rate, at the speed he's been maintaining, plus detonating all those flying swords, he has used a huge amount of spiritual energy. Correct. His cultivation base is of the 4th level of qi condensation, not nearly as deep as mine. Using spiritual energy to ride flying swords wastes so much, it can kill you. The 2 pursuing 5th-level cultivators were now getting pumped up, and yet, just as they finished talking, they caught sight of Meng Hao up ahead, and they saw something that left them feeling anything but reassured. As he ran, Meng Hao pulled out a second bag of holding, from which he produced a handful of medicinal pills which he swallowed. He did this with casual ease, leaving the onlookers with the feeling that he had countless medicinal pills at his disposal. Actually, that was true. In the following 4 hours, the 2 pursuers discovered that he had an enormous amount of flying swords and medicinal pills. They were already deeply shaken. Opening a store is this profitable? They thought. They were cultivators of the 5th level of qi condensation and could not possibly be without medicinal pills. Furthermore, after having spent so much effort in their pursuit, they couldn't bear to give up. Reluctantly, they produced some pills and consumed them, then continued their pursuit, their hearts filled with the desire to slay Meng Hao. By the time the 6th hour had arrived, the dark, black mountain appeared before Meng Hao. Lying concealed among the other wild mountains, it gave off a ghastly cold air. It seemed as if it was filled with sinister gloom. When he caught sight of the mountain, his eyes gleamed. He had expended a lot of energy along the way and felt a bit of painful regret. To him, every flying sword and every medicinal pill cost silver stones, but he couldn't worry about that right now. Without hesitation, he shot into the Black Mountain. The 2 pursuing cultivators followed him in. Some more time passed, and more pursuers appeared, one by one. Upon seeing the Black Mountain, they gaped in astonishment, then entered.